Tab 11.
11.
Tab 11?
11. Oh, yeah.
All right, we're gonna continue, okay, we're gonna continue on with tab 11, conservation. Steve, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Stephen Pajemski, Conservation Agent.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your department does?
So there's myself, the agent. I'm full-time, and I have an assistant at 16 hours to handle a lot of the administrative work, and a plug for the Council of Aging. We also have a senior work-off program person, which has been absolutely amazing. So I hope you guys continue that program. We are primarily responsible for enforcing the local and state wetland regulations. So we have a local bylaw and regulations, and then the state Wetland Protection Act, Rivers Protection Act, and a bunch of other smaller regulations. We also oversee roughly 800 acres of open space, and depending on the parcel, that depends, kind of changes what the actual work is. So Camp Dennison, for example, there's actually structures, and there's a camp manager, and we apply for a lot of CPC money to help maintain that. Other parcels of land, I've never even walked on. So it really depends on the parcel, depending on how much work we actually do, how much heavy lifting. We're really trying to improve some of the trails and get it out there to the people to know where to walk, make a trail map, stuff like that. So we have a couple of smaller projects that we're working on like that.
How do you pay for that?
For the trail stuff, most of the trail maintenance, it's through volunteers, or I just go out and do it.
Okay.
The mapping and stuff like that, we rely a lot on NVPC, and we can apply to CPC for a few $100 for some of the technical work or printing. We rely heavily on CPC for 90% of what we do. So we've purchased some land in the past, we've purchased some conservation restriction on the Willowbrook Farm this past year. All of that's through CPC and grants. We've had a very good track record as far as getting grants for the projects we worked on. But CPC is the main pool of money.
And so you really have no budget for maintenance of all this land?
No. Part of the reason why it doesn't get done very well, as far as the Camp Dennison is probably the most heavily maintained because it's structures and it's the most heavily used parcel. Most of the other ones, it's trails that take care of themselves. Some stewardship committees in the area, there's like a Little's Hill Stewardship Committee. Often when we get a new parcel, the neighborhood comes together and we form a stewardship committee and everyone's excited to do it. 5 years later, no one's doing it and the trails are all overgrown with poison ivy. Again, I mentioned Camp Dennison because we have a great group of volunteers that do so much work and again, save the town thousands of dollars. Thousands and thousands of dollars.
Can we get maps of that, trails, and is there any of the stuff mapped?
Actually, they're on the Camp Dennison
Yeah.
website.
So Camp
And
Dennison.
also maps of around town of all the other
Yeah.
open spaces.
Well, that's what we're working on now.
Okay.
A lot of them have not been mapped, and so literally someone has to go out there with a GPS and walk the trails, and then have it put on the mapping. So we are in the process of working on that.
Okay.
But it's, to be honest with you, low on the priority list. One, because we have no funding for it, so it's when we have extra time, we go and do it.
Do we have a
Camp
map, though,
Dennison.
of what we have for open space?
Yep.
If we can get
Yep.
a copy of that,
Yep, definitely.
just to see.
And you know, the Camp Dennison has a revolving fund, that
Right.
the money from
Yep.
rentals goes into it, and that's what maintains
Thanks,
it.
Camp Dennison.
I think we just got a couple of good-sized checks for some weddings that are gonna be going on
Yes,
down there,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's being heavily used.
And then you
Workshop
have
rooms.
other revolving funds, right?
Yep. I have two, well, I have a bunch, but.
That's
the
fine.
feed
Steve,
ones,
Mike's
I
gonna
don't-
get that for us, the general.
Okay.
All right, so you go down each of your line items and tell us what they go on the expense side, to purchase the services, what you use them for.
So, phones, postage, 1,400. We send out a lot of certified mailings, and they get expensive. So we are continuing to try to keep that down. We haven't asked for additional money because often we'll have people come and pick them up and sign for it, which saves $5 to $7 per document. We do that as much as we can, and as much as the applicant's willing to come in. A lot of them are out of state, so we have to do what we have to do. Office supplies is just the paper and pencils and envelopes. Travel mileage, 1,000 for a total of $3,000. I don't think it's gone up in the past 4 or 5 years, so we get by with what we have to do. I steal a lot of paper and pens from other departments. That helps keep my budget down.
Steal, it's borrowed.
But borrow, you return it. I don't return the pen.
Well, with the intention of returning.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, got that straightened out.
Now you're not currently on the permit system, correct?
I am not.
Do you?
I would like to be.
Yep.
And we just have to open up our regulations to change the fee schedule, and it'd be a pretty quick and easy process. I'll be honest with you, I share an office with the building department, and I've been hearing, every other day they're having issues. It does sound like they're doing a lot better. Last year, I was very nervous about getting on the program, because, again, we're gonna have to double a lot of it's actually more work for us. We have to continue our old kind of system as far as documenting certain things. This is additional, and it will help us track the permits, but it will also help other departments understand what we're doing. So it has a value, but I'm not gonna get onto it, I'm not gonna recommend getting onto that program until it's actually functioning better, and it sounds like it has been. So
And then you're gonna be able to get rid of the way you do things.
I'm gonna have to double up on some things. It's probably gonna work out in the end as the same amount of work, but it'll be more user-friendly, more helpful to other departments. Part of the process I still have to do it the old way. I can't remove that from the process. But
And when do we anticipate, Mike, do you have any idea to anticipate when the boards can get on?
I haven't had that discussion with anyone. I just
Because
talked to
if
John
the survey
offline.
issue is done, then that's
Yep.
that's the big hurdle, so now it's just a matter of the next steps, okay. Okay, questions?
You talked about revenue. How much revenue do you produce in a year, annually?
$15,000,
Okay.
give or take. Depends on the size of the projects. We have a 25-lot subdivision that just came in a month ago, and there's probably a 40-lot subdivision in the next 2 or 3 months that are coming in. The big new subdivisions,
And that all just
individual
go-
lots.
And that just goes into the general fund?
No, that does not. We have,
That
we're,
goes in-
we're unique. We have a bylaw account, so the local fees go into a bylaw account, and then a state account where the state fees. So I hold 15 different hats when it comes to environmental permitting. When we enforce the state act, they have a separate fee that cannot go into the town general fund. It goes into a separate, so we have a state account that has roughly $25,000 in it right now. And that can only be used for activities related to the State Wetland Protection Act. So we get roughly $14,000 in. Next year, with that 40-lot subdivision come in, that'll bump that up a little bit. If it comes in. It's on the horizon.
But we'll get all that information when you do the summaries of the revolving funds, Mike, thank you.
Yeah, as far as those revolving accounts, up till about 2, maybe even 3 years ago, when there was a lot of activity in the Conservation Committee, we were utilizing some of that money to defray salary expenses in Steve's position. And it got to the point where we were rapidly depleting that fund, and it was unsustainable, so we moved everything over to the general fund. And things like we were talking about field maintenance and not field maintenance, trail maintenance, things like that. That's exactly what the revolving fund can do, that kind of stuff, and not burden the tax rate or the general fund. But we had drawn it down dangerously to almost nothing. Maybe there was $10,000–$13,000 where it used to be $50,000–$60,000. So that's a way of accomplishing some of the things you were talking about.
So if you're bringing in the 15 or so in revenue, how much of that, I guess, how much is staying in the revolving fund versus being spent on the permitting and the?
At this point, we aren't drawing off that account pretty much at all. It's we run out of a little bit of money when it comes to expenses, so we might be drawing at the end of the year $1,000 out of it.
Okay.
But as Mike pointed out, we drew it down to such a low level
Right. You're just
that
kinda
we're kind of
replenishing.
trying to build it back up so we can actually use it for some projects.
Okay.
And at the time, we weren't really able to use it. Right now, I think last year I used $1,000 to make up for lack of expenses, which is why the expenses haven't really gone up, is we've been able to kind of use some of that money. And stealing pens and papers doesn't save that much money,
But
so it has
yeah.
gone up. We bought a file cabinet. We can't afford stuff like that, so that comes out of that bylaw account.
So that's basically, you're trying to build it up for project use.
Exactly. And again, that will save on having to go to CPC. Again, CPC is great, but it's a process, and we get a lot of scout projects and, open space improvements for $1,000. It's hardly worth going through the whole process and petitioning CPC. Usually, I save for $15,000+ projects just to make it more efficient for the town's time.
On some, oh, am I?
No, go ahead.
On something like the Wheeler Brook Farm, buying the
Conservation.
the conservation restriction, how much does it wind up costing to maintain that from
That
your
restriction?
perspective? Yeah, to do everything that you have to do
Yeah, to oversee it.
to oversee it and
The setup, the way we presented that and set it up, Greenbelt is taking on all the responsibility for the yearly inspections and paperwork. So it's costing the town $0 to oversee that. If it wasn't for Greenbelt, you're talking 10+ hours of my time a year, plus all the paperwork.
just 10 a year.
Again, it's not,
It's a
it's
small-
walking through it, taking a few pictures, writing it up. We have templates for everything. You punch in a few pictures and you go. As long as there's no major issues. But again, Greenbelt will also handle any violations or any concerns that they have. That can get very expensive.
Right.
Greenbelt, the deal I worked out with Greenbelt is that they'll take care of all of those
Does that last
expenses.
forever?
In perpetuity, which is
Gary?
why they charge, and again, they usually have a $15,000 endowment fee for holding a restriction. They waive that in that project. So again, we save the town $15,000 and we get the benefit of the restriction and their oversight in perpetuity, which I think is a long time.
Gary, you have a question or comment?
If I could go back to the online permitting, when we took that, did they get a certain percent of all the fees collected? Now, are they just collecting that, Mike, for the departments that are using that, or are we having to, okay, so we're not having to pay until each department gets on?
That's correct.
So I'm not using it at this point.
Yeah,
My
so-
fees haven't changed. When we start using it, I'll have to go and change my regulations to add a 10% onto everything for that purpose.
Thank you.
You were talking about the fee, once we hit a certain tier of number of permits, the fee dropping, is that divided by building permits and plumbing permits and conservation permits, or is that an aggregate of total permits before that? I'm gonna call it a discount.
Total.
Okay, so there is an incentive to getting people on.
Any other questions? Wow, you're getting off easy this year, Steve.
Actually, I do have one other question.
Saves the best for
He's
last.
always last.
I am, because I kind of, I need to fast forward.
We're quick enough.
You have
to see you guys.
You could have bolted, right?
Once your back is turned, we can't answer questions.
Exactly, tailgate, well, one, two.
I'm looking at the revenue of $15,000, and you mentioned that comes from just activity, weddings, whatever. I mean,
The
I'm not really
that's
sure where that
different.
comes
The
from.
weddings.
The
the
weddings is Camp
Dennison.
Dennison.
Camp
Yeah.
Dennison.
That's a separate revolving fund from
okay.
the.
Yeah, all right, all right.
They keep the money that comes in from their permits to help maintain the
I
structures,
see.
pay for oil, heat, electricity, water, everything. So they're very separate.
So it's almost like self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Yep.
Except for capital spending.
Exactly. And that's usually where CPC comes in. So right now, there's a proposal to pave some of the front entrance of Camp Dennison. Again, I don't have it in my budget, so that stuff comes from CPC.
Is the revolving fund, not getting off of that, is the revolving fund for Camp Dennison big enough? Or do we need to increase the value on that?
We increased it 2
We
years
increase
ago.
it, it's about $16,000 now. We presently have maybe 13 in there. It should be, I don't know. We're hopefully gonna spend some money on some things,
Yeah.
so.
Every few years, we revisit that.
Yeah.
And we've
No,
been good about increasing it per
Right.
Camp Dennison Committee's recommendations on, they need to be able to spend a little more, just because the cost of everything goes up.
Right, just so for
the
those
oil
of you who
bill.
don't know what revolving fund is, it doesn't go through the general fund, the money can come in and get spent out according to what it's set up as. But when you say the amount, the limit of the revolving fund, you can bring in as much money as you want, but the fund doesn't have the ability to legally expend more than what is voted on. So a number of years ago, Camp Dennison's fund was $7,000, but they were bringing more money in, and they needed to expand it, and what is it at now? Is it at
16.
16?
It's at 16.
So that they can expend up to $16,000 a year. So I guess does the DOR have a good definition of revolving fund? Probably.
Yes.
Okay, I'll look that up and send it to everybody, so that way a little bit easier to
What was
understand.
it for the ambulance? It was 1% of the total budget. It's
Yes. That's the limit for any revolving fund. 1% of the.
All the revolving funds, you mean?
no, just any one
individual
fund.
Huh?
Each individual.
Each
Each
one.
individual
1%,
fund,
right.
which would be about 25. Is it 25,000? No.
125.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of the wrong budget. Okay.
I need a tutorial on revolving funds, and this is not the day to do it.
No, that's what I'm saying, it reminds me, because we've
I'm a
talked
little
about it a few
confused.
times. We've gotta look up,
I can't figure out,
How it works?
some goes to here over here, and some goes
Like
over
the
here,
building
and some
department.
gets spent over.
The building department goes into the general fund, but mine don't.
I know, and I don't
Like
mean
that.
I don't mean, it's not,
Actually,
I'm
no,
sure
no,
everything's
no,
fine,
general
it's just,
fund
I'm a
is
little,
finally a
I
revolving
don't know where
fund.
that.
And that's-
We ought to do that.
Right, and that's, I
Yeah.
think we'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll get some definition out for you guys. I'll get with Mike on that, get some definitions out, and then Mike, you'll have for our next meeting all the revolving funds anyway,
Yeah, when I
right?
have the next, when I
That's
have the
fine.
update,
I
that
know.
would be a
I-
good time to.
I don't mean to pick on you.
No, 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 it's just, it's,
On, we ought to do an explanation on, maybe Prop 2.5 too. And, you know, how the tax rate is calculated and all that, you know, what stuff.
Ruth, you had a question?
Yeah, I don't need the answer, but you said there's no cap on a revolving fund?
Oh, yeah, there is.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You can-
I had the wrong number. He said it's 125,000.
That's what it was, but
Yeah.
then the actual amount, like you said, this one was, the Camp Dennis was at 16,000, so you can't spend more than that
Right.
in a given year.
Yes.
Correct.
Gotcha.
You can bring in as much money as you want.
Yeah, you
Sure,
can
you
load
just
it up
can't
with
ex-
money, but you can't spend it.
Okay.
What's your incentive to raise more money if you can only spend 16? A conversation for another.
Yeah, we'll do,
Oh,
we'll
okay.
do.
Yeah, sorry, but that,
No, no, that's all right.
Say, next have an explanation maybe
Oh.
on the
I didn't
town website or
understand.
something about some of the general, what does a
Well,
revolving
that's,
fund
it
do
isn't the
and
case
what-
if you're not to raise
what
money,
about that?
like a Kim Dennis and
We'll get that.
some people rent.
And actually, we'll put that in, see if
the
we can
money
put that in
goes to the
finance and
town.
advisory book
It
too
goes
this
into
year.
the- and it goes into
Any
the
other
revolving
questions
fund.
for Steve?
And-
Quick,
Ed, well, they're getting good.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve.
poster number today,
Planning, Howard?
bucks, whatever that number is, if you're, I assume you can pay off the expenses on the left, but
There isn't,
you know what I mean?
Does it go to the town?
yeah, yeah.
So why aren't we doing more of it? Or how can we
We're
promote
trying.
it? Well, that's what I mean, so how's that marketed, I guess?
I'm sorry?
We have a website.
Library and
You're not aggressively selling.
We got a new
No,
alphabet here.
and the Conservation Commission
Degree.
sort of doesn't want us to.
just like they're doing at the
We've
Olympics.
got land
Come
use,
under the
conservation,
conservation.
planning, and then library.
Oh, land use.
Land use.
Land use, I'm
Well,
going,
I'll take
you're
it.
alphabet,
It's
Ted.
as much as we want, I think.
Well, there's also, you know,
Okay, Howard, would you introduce yourself?
Howard Snyder, the town
Some kind
planner,
of outreach.
Okay.
representing the planning office as well as the office for the planning board. And part of my role is also agent for the Affordable Housing Trust and facilitating the activity of the Affordable Housing Task Force. I also serve as the town of Georgetown's commissioner to the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, as well as sitting on various other committees and boards.
Okay. I'm gonna go down through your budget and let us know what's,
The numbers are offset somehow.
Yeah, which numbers go with which
Yeah.
line?
That was my question too. Like,
You've
there's a
already-
bunch of numbers and a bunch of words and they
Oh.
don't match up.
Are you looking at the one with UMass at the top of the column? Or are you looking at the one?
No,
with-
no, I'm looking at the right top. Like, there's a $3,000 and then, you know, last year,
Are these all
2,000
supposed
this
to move
year.
up a line?
50, it
Some
should
of
have been
them.
all the way up. Is
No,
that
no,
energy?
it's actually correct.
Oh, okay.
So what has occurred between fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15?
Right.
The first one I want to point out that's brand new is we're now carrying under our budget, but it's paid out of a separate account, as I understand, is the fee that's paid for the commissioners and fee paid to Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, which is the 2706.
Oh, I see.
the fee paid
That's
to
way-
Merrimack Valley for
Yeah.
the town and the fee paid to the commissioners?
Well, it's for our involvement, and that's how I'm a commissioner to Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. It's an annual fee.
That's, and that's the annual fee for the whole town?
Right.
Right.
It's any, right, okay.
That used to have its own line item in the budget somewhere.
Right.
So that's
Now
not
it comes under
supplies,
planning.
that's
Right.
Okay.
education?
Mike, do you see our confusion?
Yeah,
Okay, could just make a note to update that with Howard and then get that out to us, please?
Yeah, just, okay.
all those, see, Howard broke, instead of lumping them in, all professional technical services.
Is that what that is? He
That
broke
first
it out?
Yeah, I needed to
That's
break
what
it up.
that first
Oh.
group is.
Oh,
So you
And
broke,
then all the other ones are, you know, you would normally get in, is other purchase services, and those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be aggregated.
okay.
Oh, I
In that
see.
line item. Howard-
That should be under other purchase services.
Yes.
Okay, can you go
Okay.
through each one then, Howard, and tell us what they're for? We'll make
Sure,
notes.
well, This was our transition from the previous line item into
Yeah,
the lump
yeah.
sum for each
Yep.
one.
Yep.
So what I'd like to do is, under professional and technical, I'd like to go to that first line item last.
Okay.
Because all the other ones, the first two I'll discuss later, but all the other line items basically stay at zero budget or slightly go down. And what has occurred is we're adding into those two items under professional and technical a $1,500 line item. Currently, that $1,500 that you saw in fiscal year 14 was a fee paid to Merrimack Valley for our use of what's called the Municipal Information Mapping Technology,
My map.
MyMap.
MyMap.
And currently, that's only available to internal departments of the town. And that is a web-based portal for accessing all the GIS data that's in town based upon tax assessor maps, showing frontage, zoning, and things like that. I'm undertaking an initiative with other town departments, as well as, in particular, the land use departments, to be able to have limited information accessible to the Georgetown residents. I'm getting calls constantly, every week, about, is my house in a floodplain? What zone is my house in? In this way, they'd be able to find that information out independently.
So this is for basically making certain information available from a portal on the website.
Yes, for Georgetown residents. It's available to residents of Newburyport, Andover, and things like that.
But it's not for you guys going mobile.
In the future goal of this, Andy, is the ability for the town internally to access more information internally. Fire hydrant, transformer locations, all the water department information on an Android or tablet or other type of Apple operating system remotely in the field. We've heard that there's a great amount of reduction in man time and expenses of having to go meet at a town department, look over several different maps, and then go out to the field. So the $1,500 is just a fee that would now be annually based for Georgetown residents, and then over the next year, we're going to look into what the fee would be to add more of the geographic information system for internal.
It's a really, we have it, Nando, it's really good. It's really good. And in addition to Merrimack Valley, what they've done, they've created a few apps that our department's using that is also going to be created, as opposed to paying a large amount, they're very short money, to be able to collect information like on catch basins. You go out in the field and you basically open it up and it goes through GIS. It clicks open and you can add all this information. You can edit it. Same thing with street signs, pavement. There's a lot of different things that this is being created by Merrimack Valley through the MyMap, and all these like little apps for towns to be able to use what will be beneficial. So there's going to be a lot of use for that. But the mobile, you're not doing mobile yet, so you don't.
Not
need-
yet.
Okay.
No, this is a little bit of an incremental steps.
Yep.
We want to be able to first get this limited information available to Georgetown residents and have the town departments evaluate MyMap. Some currently aren't even using it, to find out what their needs are and to start prioritizing. Some departments have GIS information already, but it's not being shared with other departments. And so once we get existing information collected, they can start seeing how they can use it and what they'd like to add to it.
Okay.
And that $1,500 increase, we found other money. There's a decrease in money we were setting aside for professional services, engineering, and legal aspects. So that's gone down 1,000.
Okay. We've got 700. What was 700 for?
$700 is what we are paying on an annual basis to go towards the ArcGIS.
Okay. That's just the licensing.
That's a annual maintenance fee that's being paid, and what was purchased last year was the updated ArcGIS, and what we'd like to be able to do, it's a single fee license, so one department's on it, other departments can't, but we're considering that departments have either no knowledge or limited knowledge on GIS, that as they evolve and they start learning how to manipulate their own information, they may be able to start paying for their own license. So this is a little bit independent of MyMap. The goal of having this type of fee and an allowance for using GIS is that they can open up their own data turn layers of information on and off and be able to print their own map, as opposed to having to use solely Merrimack Valley to generate a standing route map, or be able to print out just where all the valves are or the transformers
Right,
are.
well, my map takes it from ArcGIS.
Yes.
All the maps actually reside in ArcGIS. My map is actually like the portal to actually bring it together, to be able to see it and to open up layers and things like that.
They're
But-
very user-friendly.
Yeah, as opposed to going into a GIS map, which can be very convoluted and crazy.
Right.
So they basically have written a program to be able to access our GIS
GIS
maps.
for dummies.
GIS
Yeah.
for dummies. Yes. Okay. And the 500 tuition, is that for your CEUs?
Yes. Now, there was some discussion earlier on about the GOTMS and with the building department, and that's one thing our department's getting more and more involved with. And we hope to be doing some training as well as exercising our module that's set aside for the land use department, for the planning office. So come the first day of the new fiscal year, all our permitting would be tracked through that. So there's a learning curve we're going through it with right now.
Okay. And you want to run down quickly through your other purchase services, what you've got?
We've decreased some of our publications, are set aside for that. A lot of publications are no longer being issued. They're all web-based. So their fee for accessing the information on the web has gone down.
Oh.
We're finding that training and conferences, quite often, they're held as webinars, either for free or a minimal fee. So we're finding the cost of having to apply and drive and go is reduced as well.
Okay. And that's just all within the other purchase services?
Yes.
Okay.
Office supplies we've become more and more efficient with that, so that's just being held as a line item.
So apparently Steve's not stealing from you.
Yeah.
You don't need an increase.
Little does he know I go and I steal some things back.
That's fair.
Or borrow them back.
Just borrow. That's still.
What is
Borrowing.
equipment? What's the $300 for equipment?
We've been setting aside and upgrading some of our equipment. Printers have been failing. They've grown old. We have small printers, color printers in the office. This year we're looking, before the end of the fiscal year, of purchasing a new laptop for our use to facilitate planning board meetings.
Okay, questions from the board?
This is basically level funded, just the numbers moved around.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I got that. Like,
Yeah, I just wanted to point something out.
really moved around the page.
When we upgraded the planner's position from part-time to full-time, there was an agreement with the Affordable Housing Trust. Howard is the liaison, staff liaison for the Affordable Housing Trust. And as part of the agreement of making the planner's position, quote, full-time 40-hour position, Affordable Housing Trust agreed to pay for 10 hours of the planner's position. So, if you go back to the revenue detail under tab 3, it's the second page in, and down the very bottom of the revenue detail page, under other available funds.
Oh, okay.
You'll see Affordable Housing Trust, 12,416.
So his salary is being reflected in whole underneath planning,
Yes.
and then that's where the money's covering it, is from there.
You know,
Okay.
a portion of it that's
Oh.
the revenue source that we pay it out.
Okay.
Point that out mostly for the planning board and the Affordable Housing Trusts. It doesn't matter how or where he gets paid from, as long as he gets paid.
Sure.
And the Affordable Housing Trust money comes from,
Well, that's probably another,
another day?
session.
Okay.
Because we not only have enterprise funds And revolving funds, we also have trust funds. And affordable housing is an independent, you know, they get money from a lot of different places. They get CPC money, they get money.
Some divisions are still selling houses for the first time. When the houses sell, there's a negotiated fee that's paid to the trust.
So, but the trust members are allowed by law to manage that money. That never, I mean, it hits the town's treasury, but only they control it.
Well, I think we'll, on another session, when we're talking about revolving funds and things like that, maybe we'll have them come in and explain exactly what they do, so everyone can understand.
Now, is that $12,000, is that, his budget is $12,000 more than this 93, or does it reduce that budget by $12,000?
No,
It
it's,
reduces that.
Okay, got it. Nope,
Yeah.
I'm fine. Let's stop at that.
So that's used to pay his salary, a piece of
Portion
it?
of it,
A
yes.
piece of it, okay.
I'm good.
huh? Anybody else? No?
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Howard.
it.
Hey, thanks, Howard.
ZBA, was unable to send someone today, but there's all the, pretty much the same, we'll,
Well, they wanted more hours, I think. Seems to be more words here for more hours, but, you know. we can-
oh,
we
I
can-
don't think they were asking for more hours this year, were they, Mike?
No,
Oh, okay.
I think we may have them come back and,
they like that, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if
we gave them
they're
more
at-
hours a few years ago.
They're at 19 3/4, I think, and that extra quarter is gonna cost us another $20,000 per hour.
Okay, yeah.
Cost us in health benefits.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Ruth, come on down. Introduce yourself and tell us where you're
we
from,
do.
what you do.
My name is Ruth Eifert. I am the library director here at Georgetown Peabody Library, and we provide library services to the community of Georgetown, which includes books, music, DVDs, downloadable EPUBs, audiobooks, through Massachusetts library system. There's all kinds of resources available through the Massachusetts statewide resources because you're a resident of Massachusetts, and we provide the portal into that, which isn't really a portal through us. It's anyone who can get online has access to those services, but we do provide assistance on a regular basis on how to use those databases. We are the local public library, and I had a couple gentlemen who came in the other day who said, we couldn't find you on our little GPS. We couldn't find the library. I said, well, why not? I said, well, we put in the Georgetown Public Library and you don't show up. Well, because public isn't in our name. Georgetown Peabody Library is our name. But I said, how did you find us? I said, we asked at Theo's. I said, well, that's a good place to start. So Theo's knows where we are. But what we found is that 8 years ago, when we were under construction with the new addition, we were at Elm Street. In many places, Google thinks we're still at Elm Street, so.
So you can, somebody can
5
go in
Elm
and
Street
fix
still.
Google.
Someone needs to fix Google, yeah.
Yeah, you could
Not
put
gonna
in,
name me.
the thing, what you wanna do is put in several names for you, so that
Yeah.
they'll all show up.
But we began in Georgetown in 1869 on Library Street, where the community parking lot is. On the Library Street side is where the library was originally in
So you remember that?
1869.
I do, I was here.
1869.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that confuses a lot of
just after
people.
you got out
Why
of
isn't the
the
library on
United.
Library Street? So George Peabody and his
You have
sister
an overdue book.
gave money for the library.
Poor Ruth, yeah, she's probably fooling around.
Let's go with the flow. So, yeah, we now have an official address to Maple Street, which now that addresses are becoming automated, that was really something that businesses started insisting, because for 100 years we were at Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park was always our location because we're in between Lincoln and Park Streets, and Maple and Pleasant. So we applied after we had our addition put in 2007, or applied to the
Become part of
assessors
Maple
to
Street.
actually have a real physical numbered address. So officially to Maple Street. And you cannot see where the old library was from the new library, but that's okay. That's what we do in a nutshell.
Okay.
Right, you've got, all right, so you've got
We've got,
You've
our
got this
utilities are
proposed and the
still,
certification. We'll start with the salaries because you've got your
Sure.
request and the certification. Can you explain where we have new members, what the certification
Yes.
level is?
The state of Massachusetts requires its public libraries to be certified in order to qualify for state grants, specifically state aid to public libraries. We need to be certified. In order to maintain certification, our budget needs to increase an average of 2.5% over the last 3 fiscal years. So I take the municipal appropriation for the last 3 fiscal years, multiplied by 3, divide by 3, multiplied by 1.5%, and it comes up with the number that I did in bold at the bottom, amount needed for certification, $308,493. So that's usually where I come up with a certification level budget. That's our bottom line, what the state would like us to have received from the towns, our municipal appropriation in order to qualify for certification, which will allow us to apply for grants. The fiscal year 15 request is what I would actually like to get, which is a little bit higher than a certification level budget. Just as by way of explanation, on the personnel detail page, the second page, our actual salary fiscal year 2014, the actual salary being paid this year at the bottom is $201,000. Our municipal appropriation is $197,000. So we're expending a little over $3,000 this year out of our state aid account, which we qualified to apply for because we're certified, out of our state aid account. So that's just to show you what's actually being spent, and that number we use for another calculation, which I'll.
Excuse me, the
describe.
state aid number, that doesn't go through the cherry sheet though, right?
Yeah.
It
does.
shows on the,
Yes,
it
does.
shows on the budget.
It's like $7,000 or $8,000, isn't it?
Yeah, we're up to about 9,000.
Is it?
It
Okay.
fluctuates, a number of factors allow fluctuation. I
Okay,
just,
It's in there.
no, I know, how,
Okay.
so how can you expend that? Because we take all the numbers of the cherry sheet, put it into the revenues in one lump sum. So it's not like,
I have a separate line item, a separate account number for state aid. It goes into, the state requires that it goes into its own account and it's expendable by the library.
Yeah, it comes in through the cherry sheet, but
Oh, but no, you're right.
we get, it's part of the state aid.
Yeah.
I think so.
I thought no matter what, that it's just one lump sum coming in from the cherry sheet and that just gets posted to revenue as a
It comes
whole.
in twice a year from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners and it goes into my state aid account.
Yeah. Yeah, we're overcounting it, it looks like, because it is part of revenue. It's in here as public libraries.
No, I understand, but then,
You're right, I'm saying you're right.
yeah, because we're
And then it
expending,
goes into something that Ruth can expend, it's not really, doesn't really go into the general fund.
Right.
I mean, it's not a lot of money, it's not like it's gonna break us.
I just wanna make sure it's
I
getting.
rely,
yeah,
I
well,
rely on
right.
it. I rely
I'm
on
just,
it
it's,
a lot.
if we voted in for the municipal appropriation of 197,000, because we're bringing everything in, and then everything's getting expended out.
Right, yes.
Are you expending out more than what was appropriated?
I'm expending out more than what's appropriated, but it's the additional amounts coming from my grant,
No, I
or my
understand.
state aid.
No, I understand, but
Yeah.
you see, but that's what I'm asking Mike, is does that state aid come in and not get counted as far as the total revenue, or is that part of the total revenue?
I'm gonna have to get back to
You understand what I'm asking,
Yeah.
Mike? I'm concerned you're expending what is your money, but we've already expended it.
We've already accounted for it
For
as part of
it,
the aggregate amount of
Yes.
money we get, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's the first time that's come up, so that's why I'm bringing this up.
That's why I have to check in.
Okay, fine, thank you.
It's actually reflected in that final number.
Right, but the thing is that we know it's your money, but
We
you
just don't
can't
wanna
double,
account
you
for it.
can't double spend it,
Yeah.
because
It's not being, doubles.
Because it's not going into your own separate account to be used. It's still, yes, you're expending it within your whole budget. That is, so that's what it's considered. It's kind of like chapter 70 comes in and it goes into the whole budget. It isn't that the general revenue comes in and then chapter 7, everybody's kept separately, like a revolving fund. It isn't. It's still,
Right, it's not, yeah, right.
I mean, you've got to be able to use it, and you are using it, but you're getting all general expenditures from the town.
But it sounds like the state is, that maybe that's what we have to look into, is
Yeah.
the state saying it has to go into a separate fund, which means,
And it is.
what it means is
And
the
it-
other way around, we shouldn't be counting it.
Right.
And
As
it-
part
it
of the
doesn't-
overall revenue.
It doesn't gain interest, it's not allowed to gain interest.
Oh,
That account's not allowed to gain interest, because libraries are not supposed to use it as a revenue generating
No, this is just,
account
this
or
is a
anything like
bookkeep,
that.
yeah, this is
Yeah,
a
it's just
bookkeeping,
Right,
this is a
right.
bookkeeping
I'm
question.
sure
Yeah.
Mary's accounting for it properly, but.
oh, okay.
where-
It's just, yeah, we just gotta fix
see
up the
where it-
spreadsheet,
On the
yeah, okay.
spreadsheet, yeah.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
So, right, so that was an explanation as to, what my municipal appropriation is and what's actually being spent, so that you can see where my request came from. What's actually spent this year and what I propose to be spent next year is a change on my bottom line up by $2,000 in salaries. My certification number is a bottom line for me. This is what I would need to have in order to qualify for
To
certification
over
with
what
the
we got.
state.
So, like the Council on Aging, Mike, this doesn't show up on the summary. What shows up is last year's, level.
Yes.
Okay. And then the materials, could you just explain
Yeah,
for those
and
who
my
the
materials
what that-
budget
why
is-
that's a 19% and how that is
Right,
calculated?
that's part of our items the state needs to see for our certification. We need to expend 19% of our operating expenses on materials. And materials are anything available to the public, books, DVDs, not necessarily circulating items, because that can include reference materials. It can include database subscriptions. But it's primarily books, DVDs, and music, things that we loan out on a regular basis. That's materials. So whenever what I spend to run the library changes, I still need to show 19% being spent on materials expenditures. So
Can't spend it all on salaries.
if I'm spending more money out of my state aid up over and above municipal appropriation, I still need to add that matching number to make my materials budget match the 19% of my operating, because operating budget's different than municipal appropriation. So that's why that number changes across the line and it fluctuates. What I will have to spend this year, next year, fiscal year 15, is the materials amount in the fiscal year request line, which is $59,512. Because what I will spend will be that amount, and that's 19% of my operating expenses. So I'd like to see as much as possible covered under my municipal appropriation, hence the request, the actual request.
I was gonna say, wait a minute, isn't the certification, if you get just to clarify, if you get voted in the certification level, you'd only be spending 58,000, correct?
That's the amount required if that's my total budget. If I
Yes.
supplement that,
Yes, right, if you,
Oh.
okay.
then I'll have to increase
Right, I
that.
just wanna make sure, cause the way it came out was like, it was 59.1 and you listed 58.
Well, because I will most likely use funds to supplement my budget if I'm funded at the municipal appropriation level at the certification number. I
You're
still-
gonna use some of that.
I'm gonna use a little bit more of my state aid
Okay.
to supplement that, yeah. So, which means more of it will have to also go into materials.
Mike, energy has a line item, I thought all the energy was underneath one now.
I'm still getting the savings of the energy, but we broke it out so I'm paying my own bills.
So it's not rolled up onto yours, the
That's
one item?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And we did that, we can change it and move that into the town's line item. It's my reporting to the state that gets confused. After seeing utilities and everything in my budget when I apply for this certification, they're gonna wanna know. So we'd have to do a lot of recalculating back the last 3 fiscal years to remove those numbers the last 3 fiscal years. It seemed like more paperwork than it was worth,
Yeah.
Okay.
when I'm
That
still
makes
getting, I'm
sense.
still seeing the same savings,
Right.
energy savings.
As long as Mike is fine with it.
it's still showing up on my budget. So yeah,
It
this
works for
is a
everybody that
significant
way.
savings
Okay.
over what we've had in the past few fiscal years in utilities.
And what is network charge under other purchase services?
Network charges is the fee we pay. We belong to a consortium of 36 libraries, Merrimack Valley Library Consortium. That helps to pay for the infrastructure of our phone lines and our database connection to get access to our catalog, because it's a shared catalog. That pays for part of that. It also pays for the regionalization of public libraries in Massachusetts, which means that you can borrow materials from us and they come from just about anywhere in the state. So that's what that fee entails. It also pays a portion of online database for e-publications and audiobooks that we share. That's actually, our actual fee is $2,500 more than that, but we have been qualifying for a state small libraries in networks grant. $2,500. That comes off before I get the bill. It comes off of there, but our actual bill is $2,500 higher than that.
Oh, okay.
But Merrimack Valley Library Consortium is still applying for that grant on our behalf. So we're still getting it. And that was something, it was an incentive, this probably started about 20 years ago. It was an incentive for small libraries to get involved in networks, to become part of the region and to share resources. And that was something that the first year of membership, it was around the $9,000 level, because it cost about $12,000 to join a network at that, about 20 years ago. So it was $9,000 the first year, it was $7,500 the second year, $5,000 the third year, and the fourth year was $2,500, and then it was supposed to stop. And that was about where I came on board when I came to Georgetown as the director in 2002. We were on the last year of that $2,500 grant, and the state decided to keep funding that grant at the $2,500 level. So now I just started my 14th year here,
Yeah.
and we're still getting that $2,500 a year, which right now it looks like it's small potatoes, but it really does help.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's network charges. Anything else unusual in here? Office supplies are those things that are specific to office as opposed to library supplies, and library supplies are those specific to libraries, like book jackets that don't necessarily be considered an office supply. So things that are specific for a library function.
Okay, you have on your personnel detail, you have an open Thursdays.
Yes, the last few years,
I know you've requested it,
asked,
but
I would love to be open on Thursdays. We do get parents who are asking, when are we gonna be open on Thursdays? When the state's requirement for library hours open is based on population. We're in the under 10,000 population range, so our requirement from the state is 25 hours per week open. We're open 33 hours a week right now. When the town reaches a 10,000 population, which is probably not for a few more years, but when we do, we'll have to increase our hours to 40 hours a week. So adding 7 hours open on Thursday will cover that requirement. And that's, when we reach 10,000 population is when it'll be imperative at the state level that we're open longer. I'm
But
starting to
that
get
would be-
regular requests.
And the increase in salaries is gonna have an affected increase with the materials, correct?
Yes, yes. that's-
Materials
And everything.
Energy,
Actually, it's,
yeah, there'll
it's
be,
not,
yeah.
I don't believe it's gonna affect energy a whole lot, because we already keep the building at a regular heating and cooling all week, just because it's better for the building and it's better for the books. So,
okay.
the increase in utility will be having the lights on, having the computers running,
That
you know,
wouldn't-
which is
that
really a
wouldn't be too much,
minimal
I would think, no.
impact. So I don't, which is why I don't include a line here for utility increase. I think it really is primarily salary.
Okay. Actually, I saw a study, I don't know where I saw it, that said that Georgetown wouldn't even be at 10,000 by 2020
Yeah.
as a projection. So it's a ways
Yeah.
off, I think.
Well,
yeah.
when they do the library, when you do the studies to determine what your new addition to your library needs to be, the square footage, they look at population for 20 years out. So
Right.
in 2000, they were doing the 2020, and they determined that in 2020, we'd be at 12,000.
Oh, is that right?
We're not gonna be there.
No, yeah,
We're
no.
too close.
We're not gonna be here either.
But
We're not
that's,
gonna be-
that's
well,
where the size of the
Wait a minute, boy.
building addition was determined at that time, what your square footage needs to be
Right.
for it, because you build a library for a 20-year growth, and that's what your grants are
Right.
built on, what's your square footage, so.
Actually, the town had a study done a long time ago based on how much land there was available for building, a
Yeah,
build out.
yeah.
And that was only 11.
I have the open space plan,
11.5
Yeah.
at that time.
yeah.
They're
So,
just gonna have to move out of town at 9.99.
yeah.
Gone.
The libraries around
Pack
us,
your
with a
bags.
couple of exceptions, the libraries around us all are open many more hours than we are. But, the glory of belonging to a region and belonging to the public library system in Massachusetts, which is pretty unique in the United States, is that you can borrow from all the libraries around us. It's not behoven on us to carry absolutely everything there is to carry. We have a couple really strong collections, and we regularly add to those collections, namely gardening and cooking. Come to the library, those shelves are massive. Yeah.
Quick question, because
Yeah.
you said parents asking to open Thursdays. Is that primarily because they're looking for someplace for the kids to go after school?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, if it came down to either open the daytime hours, because we also have parents of young children who would love to see more children's services. Those are best done in the daytime, as opposed to evenings. On the flip side, our meeting room is being used on a regular basis. The fire department has booked every Tuesday night from now through June, so don't try and get a room that night. So the building's being used, and it's being used by town departments, by school departments, by student groups, library programming. We're only open 3 nights a week till 8, but we're busy.
Right, and I'm just looking at this, in order to open up Thursdays, we're talking just short of $50,000 extra.
Yeah, just shy of that.
That's a lot of,
I think Lou.
Yeah, but it's always nice to, to see the number and see the anticipation. And we could do it on a couple hours one year, and then, in a couple more years, adding more hours. I'd probably look at a 1 to 5 or something.
that was always good to look at the numbers and see what it would be.
Yeah.
Well,
Do
it
you have
won't make a
question?
huge difference, but I think we would only have to do that during the school year. I don't think it matters during the summer.
That's true. That's true.
So-
I mean, it won't make a
having-
huge difference, but.
Yeah,
it
it gets
it is
confusing if you
something.
change the schedule too often. We already, the only change we make now is in July and August, we're closed Saturdays. And we only open 9 to 1 on Saturdays, year round. But July and August, and I constantly have people, I never know what your hours are. It's like, they're always the same. They're
Do
the
you have a
same.
question?
Yeah, actually, that was the comment you just made about we never know what the hours are. I've had kids go through the school system in the last 10 years especially. That seems to be one of the prevailing comments is we pay a ton of money for a library, and then the town won't fund keeping it open daily, consistently. I realize it's a budgetary thing, but I think if you had framed it at the beginning when we were looking for money to do the project and said, here's the days and the hours going to be open, it would never pass. That's just my own personal opinion, even though I think we needed it. What I think people would have said was, we'd be in favor of it, but you have to frame it or fund it to be open, these days, these hours, consistency, period back in the summer. I'm just saying that's.
If I recall correctly, that I think we did bring that up a long time ago when the library did go in, that was part of the discussions of that.
Right, the
It wasn't,
increase-
it was probably not gonna be increased hours just because we're putting a library in because the budget couldn't fund it. That was a very big conversation, I remember a long time ago about being able to fund the library to be
to be
open,
the operating
to be
expenses
operating
of the new
expenses.
library,
That was
yes.
a lot of discussions.
What about the idea of volunteers? Has anybody ever talked about parent volunteers? Because a lot of the people that use the library are parents, one parent maybe stays home, so there may be an opportunity. I realize there's a liability thing there, and
Yeah,
there's a
I
couple
don't-
lights and
Well,
whatnot.
we have Massachusetts labor laws in place.
Yeah, I think it's the laws,
Just
liability and
volunteer.
stuff.
Like we have room parents, we supplement the teachers with room parents for assistance, and I think it's all volunteer based. I'm not sure how that, I'm not saying to make them run the place, but it's reasonable.
We certainly use the senior work-off program. We have 2 seniors doing work at the
I
library.
don't think so, yeah.
It is, it comes down to, unfortunately, it comes down to a budgetary
Sure.
thing of making sure that we can keep it open the minimum amount so we can stay certified, but you know, for an extra 50,000, there's a lot of departments would clamor for an extra 50,000 right now.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
departments that clamor for an extra
I know.
5,000. So that's always one of the unfortunate things is that it's just a limited amount of funds. And I think that there's, especially with everyone's tax bills just going up, I think people are gonna be watching this budget very closely this year.
And how does the construction of a new school that probably has a library in it, how will that affect the usage of the library?
You should talk about the funding of the school library to the schools.
Yeah.
They don't fund them.
Yeah, the school.
They rely
yeah.
on us.
Yeah, and it's just, and I think, and a lot of, there's an awful lot of the general public that uses this library, and this library is very heavily used when school is closed.
Yeah.
Very heavily used when school is closed, because that's where all the kids go.
They love the library. And we have a young
Don't
adult
go there then,
librarian.
it's not quiet.
At 2:20, you probably don't want to hang out in the library.
No.
2:22 is when they reach the doors.
And, Gary had a question?
Fun.
Yeah, where does the borrowing for the library in the budget, Mike? I mean, it's not on their sheet.
Oh, you mean the payment for the building project? Well, on the
That's
on the
under-
plus side,
Tuesday,
we're in year
Wednesday,
10 now
Friday,
of a
Saturday.
20-year bond.
It's in the
that-
debt service
Every day but
section,
Thursday
Gary.
and Sunday, and they're open different hours and
halfway there.
different days.
Second part to that.
You know, I just
we
go,
have
I
to-
always forget.
We get
I
some
just go
help with
online
that
and
from the
look if
state,
it's
right? So
true.
we have to
If I
stay
wanna
with the
go,
certification.
They're open
for that
3
also.
nights. I know
In
it's
order for
Monday.
me to maintain
Whatever.
certification, yeah.
Must be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. They're open at night.
I'm sorry?
You're open at night, Monday, Tuesday, and
Monday,
Wednesday?
Tuesday,
eh?
Wednesday till 8.
Till 8, and then Friday it
Friday,
closes
10
at
to
3.
5.
10 to 5. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
my
right. Not
recording
3
is
anymore.
wrong. I haven't
Yeah.
been
And
able
9
to
to 1
figure
on
out.
Saturday.
From sort of a bookkeeping question, the balance of the state aid, the $7,100 minus the $3,280.
Which line are you on?
You said you get about $7,000 or so.
We're up to around
or up to
9,000-ish. It fluctuates every year.
So and you're spending the $3,280 on the salary. So is the other $6,000?
That's one of those
Yeah,
revolving
being
fund
captured.
thingies.
Like,
Sort
are we
of
double?
kinda-
I guess
That's-
on the revenue and the expense side, are we sort of double?
That's what
counting?
that's what
Yeah.
Mike has to check
Okay.
into, because it's,
Yeah.
Yeah, my account has a balance right now of about 40,000,
Okay.
my state aid account.
Mhm.
So for many years, before I became the director, the trustee board felt strongly about not spending it ever on anything. And when I came on board, I said, you know, state aid is a great resource for us. We're applying for it. We're being certified for it. We're getting it every year.
Right.
It should be expended.
If you're doing the work to get it, you might as well. take
That's right.
advantage of
It's
something.
there to enhance library services. The Mass Board of Library Commissioners says anything to enhance library services. So it can be spent on anything.
Right.
right, and that's what we just, in regards to a bookkeeping issue,
Yeah.
for what is voted on and appropriated.
Ideally, I'm not spending it on salaries. Ideally, I'm spending the state aid on other bills, on something else.
Or a bonus.
Yeah, I used it
Program
just
or-
last week. I bought a portable screen projection unit. When I upgraded computers a couple years ago, I used state aid for that. I do have an equipment line item on here that usually ends up being shuffled off into something else because I tend to use my state aid to buy equipment. So yeah, I'm spending more of my state aid. I'm probably spending about 80% of my state aid at an annual basis. When I first came on board, we were getting around 10,000 in state aid. Within 2 years, we had a 30% cut at the state level, so we went down to 6,400. We worked our way back up to about 9,700 about 5 years ago, and then 2 years ago, we had more drastic cuts of another 30%. So I went back down to the 6,500. So we're now
Nibbling
working our way
back
back up. One of the things that does affect, that the state aid is made up of 3 different amounts. One is non-resident circulation. And that means people coming from other communities to Georgetown to borrow things from Georgetown. That does not mean they sit home in Boxford and have it delivered to the Boxford Library. It means they're physically coming to Georgetown. So when my non-resident circulation increases, I get an increase in state aid. Not a big amount, but I do get an increase. We get 50 cents per capita straight So as our population changes, my state aid changes. The other is a convoluted state lottery something number that I have never been able to figure out, but, so because my state aid is tied to my non-resident circulation specifically, every year I get a call from the state. Your non-resident circulation has increased by 46%. Why? And if that's not true, please give me the correct number. So I talked to the staff, why do we have this increase? Well, we're nicer. Okay, yeah, it does do it. Boxford closed the West Boxford branch a couple years ago. So we had people who live in West Boxford, it's closer to come to Georgetown, so they were coming. So that was, 180% increase because instead of having 18 circulations a year from West Boxford, I had 32 circulations from West Boxford, which is not a lot, but percentage-wise, dramatic increase. So now if you look at loan to non-residents, I showed you that on that page 3, there's 4 years worth of statistics. Non-residents in fiscal year 2010 was 7,000, then we went 9,700, then 92, went down a little bit. Last year was 10,000. It's not a whole lot in the scheme of things when my annual circulation's at 70,000. But 10,000 physical circulations of people that physically came to Georgetown from another community. So that affects our state aid. So that's part of why our state aid goes up, which is a plus. We're part of a region. We're certainly a good example of regionalization gone good by sharing from library to library.
Super. Any other questions for Ruth? Wonderful, thank you. It's nice to see, I like the statistics page you give.
Yeah.
Because it shows,
and
it shows what is happening, that people going through the library, and as opposed to say, it's much easier to see this, that the library is getting used as opposed
Yeah.
to.
Well, in the first of the year, we had the building sandbagged. Any of you tried to come in from July through December, sandbagged because of flooding. And so I didn't get my people counter. My people counter wasn't working. So I couldn't tell how many people were coming in the building. It's working again. Do I have people counter on there? No. We're still, right now, we're averaging about 145 people per day coming in the
That's
library.
a fair amount.
Which averages about 40,000 a year, which, population of 8,700, pretty darn good.
Yeah.
People coming are at least 5-6 times a year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Art, what is up with Park and Rec? They didn't turn in a budget?
No,
Any particular reason why?
they usually don't.
Is that right?
They think they have until town meeting.
Or are they thinking wrong? Who's in charge of Park and Rec again?
Who's chair?
Good question.
Oh, you don't know?
No.
They don't put in for a budget.
Isn't it the Metro?
Any money.
It's always been Jim.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's communications, because I did ask him at CPC on Tuesday if they were sending anybody. And both them and Park and Rec didn't seem to be aware of today's.
Park and Rec is very aware of when the budget is due, and they're told to be, no, I know.
How they seem to be.
They've received the notices, right?
I believe they do, yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate for them. So who would,
Jan.
no, Jan, yeah, Jan, so who should I contact on Park and Rec?
Jim.
Okay,
So what happens in that scenario?
We
they
send
don't
the
turn in a budget.
we send the police department after them this afternoon.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean.
They
we
got
have
a
to
little head
be
start,
accepted
you know.
to it,
Yeah,
to
well,
federal
it's-
stuff, So what
we-
happens?
We just have to get them in here at a
Get
meeting
them in
to
here.
talk to us.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I'm sure they're probably going to want more money, but it's gonna be very difficult to give them money if they don't ask for it and tell us what they need.
Yeah.
So, come on, Jim. Town clerk.
What tab is that?
18,
17.
17, excuse me, 17.
Jim, you don't have a budget in here either.
Same as last year.
Okay.
Same as last year, except for elections.
Yeah, okay.
Wait, there is an election, right?
There are 3 in this fiscal year.
That's the number we're gonna need, just.
What tab are you?
Three, yeah.
What tab is you?
Well, there were 3
17.
last year, right?
What's that?
Because last year was a
There you are.
presidential.
No, not last, this
2000
fiscal year.
2012
no.
was, that's
This
right,
fiscal year,
sorry.
we had 1.
One.
Next
Oh,
fiscal year, we have 3.
That's right. So actually, you need more money than you did last year.
In that line item.
Okay, so which line
Everything
item
else
would
is
that
the
be?
same.
Is that temporary? Is that the temporary salary and wages, the 70, is that?
No, that's just the poll workers. I'm gonna need more money in there too to fund the poll workers.
Where else?
You're my temporary help.
Yeah.
Well, do you have this breakdown that I gave to Mike?
You know what, I think I think the wrong one got put in the book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
we had a
okay.
couple like that, and we didn't catch this one.
Okay, do you know, do you have the numbers in front of you? We can just fill them in on our sheet
I don't.
Okay.
I'll have them for you. I'll get it this afternoon.
But I
this
think-
afternoon? Okay.
I think in the roll-up,
No,
it's,
level funded.
it's level funded,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't be, right?
Jan, do you want to, once you go down your
Yeah.
sheets, what you have, so we can take a look. So
Okay.
for salaries and wages, permanent?
Well, we didn't touch anything on that because we were told not to touch those 2 line items, so I
Okay.
didn't.
Okay, so what are your, those are the same, so what are your temporary workers then gonna be?
Well, I have it broken down like under election expense, poll workers, and which is the police officer, highway department, that's gonna be 14,505, just for the poll workers and the police officers and highway.
Under where?
Well, I have it under election expense. I have it broken down by account this way. It's hard doing it this way, because I have like four things that I'm putting into this, combining into this.
Okay,
So I
so-
have like town meeting expense, town clerk expense, election expense, registrar's expense.
Okay,
So
so,
it's harder to break it and put them all into here, because my temporary workers are town meeting people,
yeah,
all the poll workers, police department, highway department. That needs to, that's gonna increase on the election side to 14,505.
okay, so why don't we, what have you got for personnel, what have you got for salaries on your sheet?
I haven't touched anything, we were told not to touch salaries.
Yeah, but so you have 54,309 is permanent, right?
54,909, that's
Sorry.
Kathy and I.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes. that hasn't
and
changed.
temporary is 74, would it be
That's-
7425 plus the 14,000?
No, the 14 should be all 3 of them. It's almost like, it's like, this year we had like 1 election. Well, actually, last year we had more because of the special state election. But this year we have 3, so it's gonna be, that line is 14,505 for poll workers. And then for the, like, that includes my board of registrars, which is $1,000, and then it also includes the town meeting people, which is $800. So it's gonna be those 3 combined, it's gonna
Okay,
increase
so-
by that amount.
What is the bottom line?
Well, I didn't add them all up because I didn't touch any of the salary lines.
Okay, so what do you have in front of you right now?
14,505.
No, no, I'm just- I'm
800
saying-
and 1,000. Over here,
Yeah, for the whole year, what's your total number for the whole year? Do you have that?
77,944.
But that was what
That's
last year's.
last year's.
But you have to add in for the,
You have to add it up to 14,505
is that what's getting added to that bottom line is
Yes.
14,505?
Plus, no.
No, it's something
No.
less than that, I think.
You've got the 7, it's
It's-
14,505 minus 7,400.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
that's, okay.
All the election workers should be in the salary.
Right, right.
85,000 total.
How much?
Is it
85.
85, give or take a penny or two, huh?
85.
Oh, I've got 7080. So it's
Go ahead.
14,
That's
Yeah,
505 minus 7425. 7080.
No, but plus 14,505. We're adding $7,100 in temporary.
Yeah, I was
So
just,
you're-
So we're adding
So
7,080 into
Yeah.
temporary for what's there.
Right.
7,080
yeah.
to give you 14,505 total.
Right. So it's going up to 85.
Okay.
Should be 85,024.
Okay, what is it?
85,024.
85,024. We'll take the number from the man on the first row.
85024.
Okay.
Okay,
I
why
don't
don't you,
get that. I get 85,524, but that's all right. $500 is, we'll find it. Keep
Shane's
going.
gonna wanna go with your number. Okay, all right, so now that we're past this, why don't you tell, so everybody can have an idea of what your
What we
department
do?
does, yeah, what you
Okay.
do.
We do all the births, the deaths, the marriages, the burial
Wait,
permits.
You don't do the births, deaths, and marriages, what do you do for the births, deaths, and marriages?
But we process them all, issue any certificates that needed to be issued to anybody who needs a certified copy. We take them off the system, we file them, we send copies into the state, because the state needs copies of all our certificates. We send out the census every year to 3,600 households. When they come back, we have to enter them all into the state system, which keeps updated our number of residents, our voters. We do all the dog licensing, which is a sore subject at this table. We don't do cats because it's not a mass general law. Dogs is. Dogs is mass general law. We do all the elections, town, state, federal. We do all the voter registrations, enter them all into the state system so we know who's registered, who's not, so they can vote. We print all the street listings out, which is all the residents in town.
Is that available online?
No.
Can it be, or is it, do you need to have that, do you need to have a hard
So-
copy to give people?
No, I'm just wondering if there's a privacy issue. Is there no?
There isn't unless they're 17 and under. There's
Oh,
no
okay.
privacy issues. It's just, we print books out.
Can we make it available, if you made it available online, would that save in the printing of the books, cause people
We
could
have
just
to
go-
print the books. Well, we have to print some books.
That's what I'm saying, you have to print some books, but you don't have
If
to
we
print.
put, yeah, we all, it's revenue, it's $15 a book. If you want them, put it online, it's gonna be free.
Kinda like a dog license.
See where this is going. Okay, so that's what it is, it's just, okay.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't be like a cost savings per se,
no.
okay. And where does that $15 go?
The general fund,
The general fund? Okay.
everything goes into the general
Okay.
fund. We do all the town meeting minutes. Anything that gets passed goes to the Attorney General. We have to do all those. We post all the meetings for every board and committee, online, outside, on a calendar. We send out all the ethics rules to everyone, all the open meeting law rules, all the ethics go into a database and get filed for like 7 years, so we're in charge of doing all those. We do all the oaths of office. Anybody who gets appointed to a board or committee, we swear them into office. We collect all the non-criminal disposition bylaw fines for the police department. And we do all the filings for the ZBA and planning board filings, all the applications and all the decisions get filed in my office.
Get filed with who, the state?
No, with me. Any petitions that come in, we certify in nominations. Any nomination papers, we certify all those.
Okay. Questions from the board for Jan?
I just have, I'm just ran through my mind. Do we have animals that people cannot keep in their houses? Do we have a list of those?
That would be Board of Health.
Board of Health.
Board of
Do we
Health
have a
does that.
list, or do you know?
I don't know what they do. That falls into Board of Health regulations. I just.
Other than this, if someone wanted a crocodile in their
It
house,
would
could
fall
they?
into Board of Health, not into,
Yeah.
we just do the dogs.
We don't have a list that I'm aware of.
No?
State statute, we just go
By
by
state.
state statute.
Croc and stay. Yes.
You're gonna have to keep your wife too. There's no regulation.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Jan? Anything else? Is that just that, do we have anything on the horizon for any other special elections in our area of the state coming up
never
that we don't know?
knows. One
And were you
never
able to
knows.
get reimbursement for last year's special elections?
We got the money. You can check with Mary.
So
It
that
went
went,
back into the general fund
It went back
because
in the
it was
general
already
fund.
spent in the prior. We didn't get it till after the end of the fiscal year.
right, because it's just gonna go to free cash. And I don't know if everybody realizes that because the state, because of these special elections that they've required, because they're not just letting people get appointed, that we can apply for reimbursement for the costs that are associated.
Partial reimbursement. They
Yeah,
pay for certain things, not everything.
not everything, so.
And we never know when those are coming up.
And I know we have a new precinct, and last year you needed equipment, so you're all set with, there's
Go
no
with
added
those right-
expenses on that end?
Well, the only added expenses, they all need to be maintained. They need to be serviced every year, and That's all right in this budget, but right now, nothing. There will be new voting machines that they're testing right now, which is gonna be, we're gonna have to comply with the state when they come out with the new voting machines, but I have all that into CIP. So, and I
Okay.
don't know when they're coming out with them. They haven't told us. They're just testing right now.
Do they
so-
mandate the voting machines?
They pretty much recommend that you update because what happens is
Every
they start
5,
making.
10 years?
No, we've actually had the ones we have now since 2000.
Oh, wow.
So it'll
Okay.
be probably 15 years. The ones before that we had for 15 years. So, but they stopped making parts for the old machines, so when you start having problems, you
That
can't.
always happens, yeah.
Yeah, and we don't need to not be able to count ballots at the end of the day.
So so you don't have, with the new machine, the third precinct, you don't
have-
have any increased expenses at this point in time?
Not yet. It'll just be like when I have to buy them, but they haven't even given us a date yet. They're just in the testing process, so we don't even know what the machine's gonna be.
And there's no other added expenses for an extra,
No,
for the extra
because,
precinct, you just split everything in thirds now instead of half?
yes.
They need, well, they had to get another machine, didn't they?
We had to
Well,
get
the
it, well,
machine.
yeah, 2 years
I'm
ago.
thinking of
we got
anything,
this.
there's no other,
No, I mean, other than the maintenance, nothing more than I've already had last year.
because just with the elections last year, it's just they were, or the year, whenever, the last one I went to, the lines were long. Is that just because it was just a heavy turnout? I think it was
one was
I think it was a presidential.
The presidential's always huge.
But it seemed
always.
longer than usual, and I don't know if it was,
Well,
if
the more
it was- we
ballot
were holding up
questions,
people or just-
nope,
no,
the more
just-
ballot questions they throw on a ballot, the longer the lines get, because people don't know ahead of time, they don't read them till they get there. So it takes a little longer. But we're gonna be, starting next year, they're gonna mandate that we open 10 days for early voting, so, starting in 2016, I'm gonna definitely, yes, 10 days for early voting, so we're gonna have to open even Saturdays and Sundays.
Is that
What
in
does
a
it
booth
people to
or
vote?
absentee?
It's called early voting. It's
Right.
not
How do
absentee.
we do it?
But are you, am I going into the booth to do that, or am I following?
You're gonna
like
be
an
coming
absentee
wherever we
ballot?
designate a place for polling for 10 days into a voting. We're gonna have to set everything up.
it's like a little
Every-
portable voting booth,
Right.
right?
We don't have any of those right now, so
Somehow, some way.
it's gonna, yeah, they're making us open for 10 days. So it'll be added expenses when it comes to that, because
And
I
that's
need
coming-
poll workers and,
Yeah.
but that's next year.
Next fiscal year, 16. All right, so we'll have that. Gary, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, it's just a matter of, to have, they've got its voting, it would be at her offices, but then more
have
than
to have-
likely, you'd have
We'd
to,
have to have room for 3 precincts. You know, it's 3 machines, 3 check-ins, 3 checkouts.
do they have to do that, or is it
For-
just
for
one?
early
I thought
voting?
For early voting, I thought you just have to have one booth that they can fill it out on, and,
I'm not sure what they're gonna make us do. The bill, the House passed one version of the bill, the Senate passed another. So now they have a committee together to try to, one of them said during town clerk's office hours only. And then the other said no, 10 days, Saturdays and Sundays included, so.
without refunding us.
Well, they're trying to push for an unfunded state mandate, so I don't know. We don't know, it's in the works.
Being in Massachusetts, it'll cost us
Yeah,
most
that's right.
unimaginable.
See, as it was.
It's gonna cost the state millions of dollars just to do this, but.
Life a lot more complicated. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Especially when we work 20 hours a week, it's like gonna be very difficult.
Anything else? Bless you.
That's it.
Thank you. Next year, we will go opposite alphabet. We'll do this.
We'll do you
We'll do opposite alphabet. We'll do it in a receding order. Thank you. Anything else you want to share with us? Great. Thank you, Jan. Grab a donut.
Grab a bottle of water.
All right, Lou, water. Anybody need any coffee or anything?
Probably not gonna remember next year that I go first instead of last. So.
You're probably not going to remember?
Oh, I definitely won't remember. I'll remember that I went last this time, and I'll make a note. I'll have to make a note somewhere to say to go last to be here first. Whatever. No big deal. It's a good process to watch everybody go through.
Oh, you're running,
Lou, can you introduce yourself because you are new to the water department.
Yes, my name's Lou Mamelette. I have lived in town for about 20 years. I live on Marlborough Road. In September, I started as the, changed the name of the management position over there from superintendent to general manager. But I think I think my function is much the same, although I think the name change was in some ways trying to convey the idea that they were looking for somebody with a little bit more of a management and professional approach as opposed to say like a lead operations approach. But thus far, most of the things that I've done seem to fall into the same category, so perhaps it may be just semantics in the name. Yeah, I started in the middle of September. I'm not new to the water profession. My background is, I'm a registered professional engineer. I spent about 20 years in the consulting world. I spent the last 5 years working for a construction company. So my background is sort of engineering and design, and then more recently, construction management. And now I'm kind of on the backside of that circle. I was the engineer, then I was the contractor, now I'm the owner. So it's kind of a good balance. I like the role. I like the town. Lived here for 20 years. I raised my kids here, so looking forward to the challenge and hopefully helping to make things, or to improve the things that need improving and try to follow along and continue up the things that have worked.
Okay, so I guess what we'd like to do is just go down through the budget. One thing I noticed is that you have permanent salary and wages went down, so you're not replacing someone? Is that the intent?
I gave it to
Yeah,
you. You know the one I gave you, had the staple in it?
I came into this position after a little bit of a shakeup. I don't know, I guess, given the size of the department, maybe it was a major shakeup, on a percentage basis, but my understanding is there was an individual that had worked there for a while that was let go, somewhat of a disciplinary type of an action. Unfortunately, we also had another one of our employees pass away just recently.
Yes, yeah.
Scott Collin,
Right.
I'm sure people know who he is. So right now, what we're trying to do is to fill Scott's position.
Oh, okay.
And, but I've done sort of a manpower evaluation of the department. Person power, I guess is the better way to say it. To determine sort of what the staffing level should be. And I've worked that up through the Board of Water Commissioners. And I think they're generally in agreement with what's shown here. They met and approved it, so.
Okay.
Right now, what's shown there is replacing one of the positions of the fellow that passed away, not refilling the position of the person that was released on disciplinary, and actually bringing on a second part-time person in the office, so that the office basically has two people in it at all times. One of the people is an office manager, the other one is more of an administrative assistant. There just happens to be a significant amount of phone calls and resident interactions, paperwork, billing, record keeping, and whatnot. And my opinion is that it's difficult for one person to do that by themselves. I noticed that things are a whole lot more productive on the times when there's the part-time administrative person is there, and I think it's a reasonable expense to give much better results.
So this is pretty much what you feel your staffing is gonna be for the next fiscal year?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of what I've done in the last, say, whatever, I guess it's been 5 months, has been trying to, sort of acclimate myself to the way things have been done there, the tasks that are required. I'm familiar with of how a water department should run, but I've always observed it from sort of from a consultant's role or a contractor's role, and so some of the nuances and the, you know, and the kind of behind the scenes things, you know, I had kind of had to bring myself up to speed on. I mean, there's no mystery over there. It's just a matter of, you know, kind of organizing it and managing it in a way that I think will make it easier to move forward. That's in large part what I've been doing for the last 5 months. So part of that was to kind of evaluate all the tasks and then develop a kind of a, you know, kind of a master schedule of all the things that needed to get done during the year. We, you know, we're responsible for the operations and maintenance of all the water facilities. So that's 3 wells, a water treatment plant, 3 water storage tanks. I think it's like 65 miles of water mains, service connections to, I think it's about 2,800 customers. And then interacting with like the highway department for things like water main breaks, handling all the billing. You know, we generate our own revenue based upon rates we set that are a function of the operations and maintenance costs on an annualized basis, plus a look ahead for our capital improvements. We also have DEP, you know, sort of to answer to, as well as the public, of course. But DEP, from a regulatory perspective, they are the oversight at the state level that controls what we do, or regulates and monitors what we do. So there's a lot of activities associated with that we have to report to them. And then, you know, if we're not meeting their expectations or the public's expectations, then, you know, there's sort of additional requirements that wind up happening. And those tend to be things that we're not just encouraged to do, but obligated to do. Things like consent orders and whatnot to make improvements when it's deemed that they're necessary. We're actually under a consent order now, which is prompting sort of a reevaluation of the needs of the department, especially from a water quality perspective, and also from a, I guess, an infrastructure management perspective.
Consent order from whom?
DEP.
Well, I got a couple of questions in regards to personnel.
Sure.
Before we move on to expenses, you said there's one person that's been let go and you're not replacing them.
That's correct.
Is that currently into arbitration?
It is.
Okay, so there's a potential that person may have to make him back into work.
I believe, I mean, the answer is there's always a potential.
Yeah.
What I've been led to believe is that the likelihood is fairly low, but
So if this person comes back and they're able to come back, does that mean they're going to bump someone else out because it won't be funded? I guess the question is, you're saying this is what you feel is needing to be funded, so are we potentially, if this person comes back and has seniority over somebody else, they have a potential of bumping someone, so now we have an unemployment expense?
the person was let go prior to the start of the 2014 fiscal year, and the position was funded then. The expectation is that the resolution of that issue is going to happen before the end of fiscal 14, in which case if we had to come up with money and sort of back payment or whatever, I don't know what the terms would be, that's covered. Moving forward, it's not shown here in this budget as being accounted for. However, I believe that the money's saved in the past year for not having to pay for that expense would turn into free cash. Now, whether or not that can be moved in to cover something that's not budgeted now, obviously it'd be a special town meeting or something along those lines.
Well, the way it would work right now, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, that if 2015, these items get voted in for the number of people or whatever, and this person comes back, someone's gotta go out, correct? Or do they have to just find the money and to keep the people there?
Well, if they're doing away with, it's pretty sticky, because if he prevails in arbitration, there'll be back pay and he'll have to be given his job back. But
That's all in
since
2014, but that's already funded.
Right.
Yeah.
But going forward, if they've eliminated the position, he'd have to be given somebody else's position. And so, yes, you're correct.
So there's a potential of someone having to be laid off and us and water department incurring Would it be water department unemployment, or would it be the town side incurring unemployment?
That's a good question. They're under our workers' comp, they're under our insurance, but,
Would that be figured as an indirect cost?
you know, we haven't had, I don't think we've had any layoffs, or termination of claims from the water department. But my guess is the town would be stuck with it.
Okay. Can we get a cost on that?
Well, it's $600 a week, times 99.
99 weeks?
Yep.
Well, for 1 year, fiscal year, so 600 times 52, so that's $31,000.
645, just say, a week. That's max.
So it's 33,000. Lou, if you can check into that budget and look into that, because
So what you'd like to do is, you'd like to have it shown to cover, at least cover that expense in the event that it happens?
I think you need to.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you need to, because you know, it's, the difference is not knowing who it would be bumping. I guess that's the question, is who would it be bumping, and if we're gonna say that even it's a $61,000 job and the unemployment is 50% of that, is it really worth losing an employee to pay 50% of a salary for nothing?
I
You
understand.
follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. I guess the problem right now is that we're not in a position to hold off hiring to replace the position for Scott Collin.
Right, but that's a different issue.
What I'm saying is if it, and I don't know how the union would look at it, but my guess is the last person in would be the first one out, at least according to the rest of the union. So I'm just not in a position to wait much longer, because we have lots of operations and maintenance aspects to how we run the place to
Right, but Scott-
avoid holding that off.
But what was Scott, maintenance? He was maintenance craftsman, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe actually he was listed under the labor D1 T1, although I think he was actually a T2, so I'm not really sure if it's listed correctly there.
I think at a minimum, you need to fund this budget, put this budget in as if you're funding for what you have positions right now. Because you need to fill Scott's position.
Yeah.
And if this person ends up coming back,
Okay.
you need to have the funding for it.
So don't show it out on the unemployment, show it on the whole side.
Mike?
That's
I don't know, the rest of the board, do they have an opinion on this?
It'd be easy to do it, I think it'd be smarter to do it that way than versus finding out if time goes down the road and he does have to come back, something happens, then you have to have a special town meeting, he's got the money, they don't spend it, you don't spend it.
Yeah.
Right, it just goes into reserves.
If you have to go out and replace, you
Yeah.
know, you
You always have
bail
to do
and-
worst case scenario.
It needs to be
You
counted.
can't do best case scenario.
Yeah, so I would fund your staff fully. And speaking of staff, when was the last time negotiations took place for?
They are planned for in the next couple of months. I think their contract ends on June 30th of 2014.
Last year, we had brought up the position of really, of trying to bring that contract in line with the rest of the town employees, just because it's an enterprise fund, that they really should be in line with what other unions have been doing. Has any of those conversations, and we'd kind of asked for Mike, I think, to be involved, and maybe some selectmen involved in negotiations, has that taken place?
I,
No?
No.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think
I know the board is a separately elected board, but I think it would be advisable if they actually, you know, it's still funded by the taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean,
To be somewhat in line.
at the risk of speaking for the board, what my understanding is that the union that they negotiate with isn't necessarily looking at the water department employees as being under the town's employee policies. Now, that may differ from what the town believes, but at least the employees are being told by their union that they're kind of separate and distinct from that, and I'm not.
That's not the case, is it, Mike? I don't believe so.
I just think there's
You're
some
paid-
gray area there, and I'm not, it's not gonna fall within my purview.
Board, the water department's an elected board, they have authority over that contract, just like the light. The town
Well,
doesn't.
they're,
They
water-
they
the light
negotiate.
department is founded under, chapter 164. But they're under a different, Mass General Law, and.
But
I
their
have
board
a-
is elected, Mike. and they elect-
I know that, Wayne, but I have a legal opinion from legal counsel that, you know, anything that's not in their contract reverts to the town's personnel policies. They're not exempt like the light department is.
Can I throw one more thing in? Again, my understanding, at least from the board, is that in instances where there's nothing written into the union employee's contract, the board, it's within the board's purview to develop and implement their own policies. And some of that, I think, comes to the management, my role, you know, to determine.
Are the wages
those.
in your contract?
Yes.
I think it's.
There is a gray area there, and that's what,
Yeah.
it's just, we've got 2/3 of a new board, two people new, or?
Yeah, and I'm not sure
And
that the
Lou's
third
new, and I
person-
think this is an opportune time to actually do a lot of review of the policies and some other things, and to actually, if there's some areas that should be falling within town personnel, which, because light department's different, and just because it's an enterprise fund, and just because
Yeah.
they're elected officials, may not necessarily mean that they fall something a little bit different, and this is the opportune time to actually, for you guys to find out what's going on with that, to get the answers,
I
because
don't-
nobody's been able to give us the
I
answers.
don't think it's unreasonable to have a conversation. I'm only kind of repeating what
Right.
I've been led to understand. And
Yep, if you and Mike can get together on that and just get the answer on that.
I mean, I think, well, I mean, again, I'm not gonna have the direct say in this because I believe it's an issue related or that falls to the board. I can certainly facilitate Mike coming into a meeting or whatever, or kind of coordinate with that. I don't think would be too difficult to do.
Okay. Any other questions in regards to salaries?
Are these salary increases reflective of the old contract that you have here?
I believe what's listed there is a 3% increase. The FY 2014 salaries are I believe are right from the contract. And they're what
And this
was,
is the last year of that contract, right? You say?
14
Yes.
will be the last year.
yes. And so
14
what's
will be
listed
last
there is what was shown this time last year as projected. The 2015 reflects, I believe, a 3% increase. That's not been decided. I think it's just a plug number to show
What-
you what's expected. or
What should
what's
be a plug
anticipated.
number is you should level fund everyone salary, like we're doing on the town side of the budget.
Yeah.
And then have a certain amount that you think is going to be there that you might need. Because in negotiations, you automatically saying you're giving 3%, it's kinda like for the union going, great, you already funded us 3%. It doesn't give negotiations a lot of room to find out and to see if we can get them in line. The water department has always been out of line with the rest of the town.
So what you're saying is it's supposed to be shown as level funded. If there's any, I mean, I didn't create the 3%.
No,
The board developed that as a concept to move forward for their budgeting purposes.
Right.
And I think they'd probably look at that as, say, an upper limit. And if in the concept of budgeting, obviously, like you said, you're looking at worst cases or upper limits. Are you saying now you want it shown the other way? And how do we, because I believe it's not going to be zero.
No, you show everybody's level funded, and then you have another line item with the dollar amount equal to what your difference is right now.
Okay.
And you put it in there because of the negotiations.
Okay, and so,
Because it's just as, like, your salary right now also is, are you under contract, or?
I am.
You're under contract, and
I
that,
am.
is that number firm amount under contract right now?
It is it is affected through, I guess, my 1 year anniversary. There were numbers for walk in the door, 6 months, 12 months. After that, I think the only thing think there may be some provisions in the contract that tie it to whatever increases the, you know, nothing less than whatever the employees get.
So your number here is already contractually
Yes.
guaranteed? Okay.
Yes.
Everybody else's is not, so that's why you should really pull out
Yeah, you
pull out the
shouldn't put
numbers,
it in
level
there if
funds
it's
and
not,
salaries,
yeah.
and then put a dollar amount in a separate line item, because then you need to negotiate, and you can, I'll send this, I mean, we can take a vote of the board, or, see what the board's pleasure is. I understand it's a separately elected board, but I think it would behoove you to actually include Mike Farrell, our town administrator, in negotiations too. Mike, do you agree or disagree?
Well, at least somebody from the Board of Selectmen. They're
Structural.
supposed to be included with the school, but they aren't.
What's with them being an elected board, and like what's FinCom's relationship with the water department? Like what's our role? Let me ask it that way and see how you answer.
We're a
It's very
financial
tricky.
advisory board, and we're to advise on all financial matters of the town. They're a separately elected board to oversee the department,
Mm-hmm.
and if it wasn't them, it would be someone like the Board of Selectmen would be overseeing the water department. It's still a financial entity that goes out for residents to be paying this
Okay.
amount. So we are charged as a board to really look at financial aspects.
Even within, I guess okay,
And I think especially now,
perhaps even more so.
perhaps even more so, because he's got a challenge. He's been in a challenge, and he's got a challenge ahead of him.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a lot of information that we as a board have been waiting on for a number of years. But I'll bring up some of that afterwards to help us. But
But I
Jim,
mean,
Chris?
I was just gonna say structurally, there's a difference between the water department and the electric department. The kind of enterprise fund the water department is if they overrun their budget, the town has to make up the difference. That is not the case with the electric department. They're totally on their own. So that's why our involvement with the water department is very different than it is with the electric
That's the
department.
actual answer.
Because we have stake in the game, essentially.
Okay.
Can I get an explanation? I mean, I'm new to the board, so scheduled OT, unscheduled OT.
Sure.
All that kind of stuff at the bottom there.
So we have a drinking water treatment plant. It's up next to where the kids play soccer, up on West Street. That plant has to be manned 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, holidays, everything. In addition to that, we have to monitor and check on all the pumping stations. The pumping stations are basically the wells. So on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, there's a 6 hour, I guess, time and a half component to the salary associated with it. It's not salary because it's wages, it's hourly wages. So those are something that's built in and required by DEP in terms of manpower effort to run the community's water system. And so those are kind of looked at as overtime, because these aren't really, but that fluctuates from person to person because it's whoever's on call or scheduled for that. Right now, with the passing of Scott, we went from having 3 people who are capable of doing that on our staff to only 2. So suddenly their overtime numbers are going up because it's 2 people covering instead of 3 people. Things that are unscheduled overtime are water main breaks. We had one on Martin Luther King Day, the Monday. So, I mean, and those are things that we can't really account for. I mean, I could let the water gush down the street and wait until the next day. Maybe I should have, but to save a few dollars, but it also was freezing out and, the potential for making, a problem at the end of Nelson Street and somebody getting hurt. Those are just the things that it's just like Peter's snow removal budget. I mean, you can't control, you can't make it snow during Monday through Friday, 7 to 3. So it's just, it's an additional cost. I did actually save the town a few dollars because we had a water main break and we didn't fix the water main break on East Main Street while it was snowing. We waited till the next day until it stopped snowing because it was safer to do it and it wasn't creating an emergency or whatever. So, and we happened to do it during normal working hours. So, I mean, sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't.
So there is opportunity, or not opportunity, there is a scenario where the town might have to fund any unscheduled overtime if it's not in the budget. You know, in terms of what he's proposing, is that what
Well,
we're saying?
I think that when you say the town, at least in the last couple of years, I believe the water department has sort of underestimated their revenue, but they've been fortunate enough to collect revenues beyond what their revenue projection are, and they've been diligent in, I guess, spending under their estimated expenses. So that's turned into free cash that's been appropriated in as retained earnings for infrastructure improvement. As you'll see in other areas, we have a fair amount of infrastructure improvement that needs to take place. The big picture, I think, is that the finances are in respectable shape and moving forward. You know, probably will remain that way. So the idea, I mean, I realize that yes, there's always the likelihood that the town would have to step in and help, but I think right now, the sense that I'm getting is that we're in reasonable shape, and the truth is the rates are reflective of the look ahead on your capital expenses, plus an acknowledgement of what it takes to run the department. One of my biggest challenges basically is just trying to corral all those numbers together. The last person that was here had them corralled together in a way that it was easy for him to look at. The next person coming in, for me, it wasn't quite as easy or it wasn't as comfortable as I'd like to see it. And so I'm trying to take the pieces and assemble it in a way that looks cleaner to me. You know, but I don't think you can argue with there's a substantial amount of free cash there and monies that have been appropriated in for future improvements. So, I mean, I think in general, we're gonna be okay. It's just a matter of me kind of getting up to speed on the proper way to present this, and if we have an issue or a challenge, like, you know, like the thing with the employee, I just need to frame it correctly so that it makes sense to everybody on this board, and also to my own board, because their expectation of me is much the same way as the expectation that you have.
Right, they should make sure the rates come in, the revenues are appropriate to pay for any of the direct costs that they have, any indirect costs. Make sure they have some reserves built up in there, so then the reserves can either be used for an emergency fact, or you plan out what those reserves are gonna be to be used for capital funding. Because ideally, they should be self-sufficient, and they really shouldn't be going for bonding on long-term issues, because that just costs more money unless you can pay for yourself. But that's also a sheet I wanna talk with after. Lou, did you get a chance to look at those sheets last night?
Yeah, I did, and I've been trying to plug numbers into it.
That's
yeah,
fine.
I promise to
discuss-
work as
No.
hard as I can to get whatever you need as fast as you can.
We'll talk about that afterwards, but I'm gonna give you a hand with that, we'll talk about that after.
Just to give folks a tiny bit of perspective here, I think our budget last year was set up as about $1.48 million.
You're about that now.
Yeah, and the revenue, hold on. I just added up the last 12 months of bank statements, and I see $1,632,000. That's just the last 12 months of bank statements.
That's in reserves?
No, that's just
That's revenue. That's their income.
That's just what's in.
Income.
That's just the money that's in the bank statements.
What is your retained earnings / reserves / right now? You don't know? Okay.
I don't have that number directly. I've been in Mary's office once a week for the last 3 months or whatever, and getting a lot of that information pulled together, and she's been great. Everybody over there has been. And in the fiscal FY 2013, I went back and looked at the bank statements just from there, and I see $1,535,000. And so our budget was built around $1,480,000. And and we're tracking, and we basically have survived with one less employee, and we've underspent our budget. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's a fairly substantial amount of money. So I just think in general right now, it seems like we're going in the right direction, which when you get to start looking at the capital improvements that we're being required to make, you'll understand that we better be.
Sandy, what's on the budget revenue side? What's transferred from water department?
That's our, they call it direct, we call it indirect. We pay the health insurance, liability, their portion of the liability insurance, and any overhead expenses.
Okay.
We charge back to them.
So it's more
They're all
a reduction of expense
They're blank
Yeah.
worksheets.
than really a revenue. Okay.
Okay, so your expenses are the best that you could do at this point in time, right?
Are you looking at the first sheet of the one that you sent me originally?
Yeah, I'm looking at your sheet. I mean, what I've sent off, there's 3 different sheets that I use, and that's why I sent it to Lou last night to look at. This one with all the lines on, I apologize.
Oh, yeah, I'm not there yet.
No, no.
Yeah, okay.
This one, there's a couple of different sheets that I'm hoping, not knowing what you have for reporting and what you don't have for reporting, Lou, I'm hoping some of these might be able to help you, cause just to kind of plug in, and I'll be more than happy to go over and help you. For the water budget and rate projection, it's a great way to look out to put down all the costs that are associated with the water department, which is water direct costs, personal services, water maintenance, carryovers, whatever, and capital articles. And then you've got indirect costs that Mike was just referring to, which is a cost that they would pay the town, which is, say we had a vehicle maintenance department, say Donnie headed up all the maintenance of vehicles in town, and that's,
Right.
we'd have to pay Donnie, that department. Any sort of administration fees, if there's any costs that are associated, say Mike's percentage of time, he spent 5% of time working with the water department should reimburse 5% of his salary back to us. So that's all the indirect costs. And then putting in the debt service, basically coming down to what you grab for all your costs, and then putting in your revenues and other service revenues, and really trying to come up with what your costs are, what your revenues, so you can figure out what your rate should be. And then but then also how much you want to have in reserves, to plan to have in reserves, to have X amount of dollars to carry forward, because then you can use it to carry forward to as opposed to just bringing the money in, which is what unfortunately the board did a number of years ago. They'd bring the money in, and then go, let's spend it. Without really a plan in place.
Yeah, mate.
And then all of a sudden they didn't have enough money, and then rates would go up, or all of a sudden we got on our bill the fixed fee.
Right.
One year, all of a sudden a fixed fee came on the bill out of nowhere, and nobody knew where it came from.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to answer a little bit of that. I can't really speak about what happened prior to me getting here, except for sort of just a general understanding and not really too much specifics. But obviously you develop the rates based upon what it costs to run the operation, plus what you project out ahead for your capital expenses. And obviously, getting your arms around all those things can be a daunting task, so you better keep it in front of you. And that's, I believe, a lot of that had been done. Again, some of it has to do more with just kind of tightening it up in front of me personally, not as a department as a whole. We also have undertaken, an evaluation of the whole system, which has yielded a bunch of recommendations that need to move forward, and that's, obviously been driven by DEP. The recommendation that we're talking about, we've identified here in the capital plan that we sent here. So the idea of taking the money in and not knowing we're gonna spend it, I think has been corrected, because I think we clearly know where we're gonna spend it. And we can, obviously we can share that with you, and you can see that. How you plug it into a spreadsheet or whatever, I'm sure there's different ways to do it. The only thing that the challenge for me dollar-wise is trying to build a budget that makes sense to me in terms of having an understanding of all the things that have to get paid for and accounted for. And I've essentially developed that, and that's all based upon my knowledge and understanding of how the department's supposed to work, what it takes to really run the place. Then I have to reduce that convert that to other languages. One of the languages is the breakdown, the way it's set up on the sheet that you folks sent. The second way is to match it up to the way it gets entered in the Munis system. And now a third way is what you just sent me here.
Right, these are just examples, and to see
Right.
what you have.
So,
yeah.
so it's for the purposes of making sure this board understands where our costs are and how this is all developed. But I have no I have no doubt that I'll be able to furnish all that to a point where it completely makes sense. It's not that the information doesn't exist. I'm trying to tighten it together to a way that's easy for me to understand, but more importantly, easier for me to track, so that it's not flying around. Because the expectation from my board is that I identify them to them on a snapshot basis every meeting where we're at, not just once a year or once the yearly process with you folks.
Right.
But the two of them should be lined right up, so it's just sending you the next one.
And I think the general public wants to have that information too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and I don't believe it's difficult, to identify. It's, some of these things things go from one pocket to another. I have, the budget that I sent to you has like 200, the number for the indirect cost was $213,070. I just slid that number over because I've been told that, the town doesn't absolutely know what that number is as of today, so I just slid that number over to show roughly what it should be. But I have estimated budgets in the past, in the lead up to that number, that showed 262,164. But it has something called shared employees for $21,000 and vehicle and liability insurance for 21,000 and change. So the point is putting things in the right pockets so that I can convert what I understand into a language that matches up with whoever's asking for it. And that's just basically coding out the cost or the expense and then resorting the table to whatever mechanism anybody wants. And it's a database function. It's simple. So I mean,
but I think it's also a matter of you've got to do it with Munis and whatever you do, it doesn't have to necessarily match. But everybody needs to understand where it's
Yeah.
coming from and what is involved in the costs.
I've been criticized in the past of talking too long, providing too much detail, breaking things down too fine. I'm going to continue to do that for myself because I know how to defend things when I can put my fingers on every number. But in terms of reducing it up, it seems like the other systems that I've seen, there's a sort of a reduction of those numbers into kind of bigger buckets. And, again, I'm not an expert on the municipal finance. I'm sure I will be, very soon. So really, it's just a matter of how anybody wants to see the numbers presented. But in terms of knowing all the numbers and knowing that they're all there, that I know I have, and I know I'm setting it up in a way that I can demonstrate that to anybody who is asking.
Right, and it's just in the other sheet that has the yellow and the blue on it that I gave you guys, that's for debt service, and I put down here all of the items that Lou had listed for capital, but it's not necessarily, and that's where you have to plug in, it may not necessarily be debt.
Yeah.
It may be stuff that, he's got a capital project of corrosion inhibitor. I mean, there may be things that really should be part of the budget, that maybe the budget needs to have a line item that
Yeah.
takes care of, specific projects that they only get done, they're only done like once every 10 years, but you've got a different project for those 10 years. But they shouldn't be, and they should be planned on
Yeah.
to be done.
I'm not expecting everybody to understand all the specific words and terms or whatever because it's specific to the engineering world and it's more specifically to the drinking water world. But, some of these projects are, say, in that particular case, there'll be a capital project associated with adding the infrastructure, the built infrastructure that facilitates that. There'll be an annualized cost moving forward to buy the chemicals to fill the day tanks. That's part of the treatment of it. And there'll be a labor charge associated with that to maintain it. And, so there's a lot of breakdown as to what that really means. So again, it's back to putting things in the right buckets. So.
When do you think you'll be able to have numbers in the right buckets to be able to give us more detail?
This?
No, whatever the bucket, I mean, it just.
Oh, I mean,
I gave you these just as, for kind of an understanding, because I think from a financial perspective, a rate projection, some sort of rate projection sheet that's taking what you have for costs, indirect costs, putting in the debt service, putting everything in, what your revenue is, to come up with how do you guys come up with your rate, to make sure that the rate is right. But more importantly, when you're plugging in all your capital items, where's the rate going?
Right, the rates were adjusted, I believe, 2 years ago, which, I don't know exactly what the timing was or whatever, but we have 2 of the 3 commissioners are new in their term. So that means the rate adjustment happened essentially when the two newest members weren't really on the board, or probably, you know, maybe one of them might have been there for a month or two or something like that. So it appears that a lot of the rate adjustment happened before most of the people in responsible charge over there now have been there.
Right.
So in terms of reevaluating the rates, right now, we're coming up with a list of things that we need to get done. So we've kind of come up with the cost side of things. The next step is to evaluate where that lands with the rates. I think that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just.
But I
it's-
won't have
it's-
that number
I mean,
by the end of this month. I mean, it's gonna take a little bit more time to develop that.
Right, but I mean, as a ratepayer, I don't want you to have a certain rate, and in 6 months from now, I get a ridiculous bill because you guys have figured it out, and then in another year from now, it goes up again because you should be able to project it all out. You should be able to figure out what you've got going on now between the next 5 to 10 years. You know what your big projects are, and really spread them out until you can figure out what the costs are going to
Well,
be. I mean, it's a budget.
Yeah, I'm not-
Household budgets. People do the same thing. You know how much you're making in money.
Yeah.
And you sit there and say, okay, I'm going to put so much money away for vacation, so much money away for here, and that's how it's all. It's the same concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and now I will speak for the board. The board's approach here is to go with the least cost alternatives to see if they can get the results that are needed without expending unnecessary money and making it drag out for unnecessary amounts of time. So of course, we're implementing all the short-term recommendations, which are all things that are within our capacity to handle financially now, both with the way the rates are set and with essentially with the monies that are set aside now.
And where are those getting paid for? Are they in the budget somewhere? Or how are you paying for them?
Some things will be within the operating budget, some things will be from retained earnings.
And those are the type of things that we would like to see.
Yeah.
You know, it just is, you know, what are these projects, you know, you've got these projects, are they gonna be debt, are they gonna be retained earnings, or are they gonna be budget?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea right now is to figure out the correct balance, and I think what in the engineering process, there's planning, design, and construction. The problem with a lot of projects is that they never get to construction because the funding's never there for the design. You know, people plan, and then they can't get over that hump.
Right.
And so, right now, you have to balance off not spending all your retained earnings to get through and wind up getting through all the money, and then you don't have a financial bridge to get to the construction part of it. Because a lot of the funding sources that are out there, like SRF, they don't fund the design, they fund the construction.
Right.
So if you run out of money in your retained earnings before you get to that point, you can,
Yeah.
you can get into trouble. So I mean, I think.
Retained earnings is your savings account.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that there needs to be a very careful plan, but at the same time, they don't want to plan ahead to spend money unnecessarily. So we're trying to implement as much of the short-term stuff now to see what benefits we get.
Right, understandable, and we'd like to see it on paper.
Yeah.
Right.
I think Lou and the board, they've got a handle on it. I mean, I think the time is crunching on them hard.
Yeah.
And they don't want to make a mistake.
No.
They do not want to spend more than they're taking in. I can get that very
Hope so.
clearly. I think they're having a little, I think their issue is to put this all on a piece of paper and a plan for a year from now is okay, but they're looking at it going down the road for long-term and short-term. And I don't think they can do that in the next 8 weeks. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Well, I think whatever they can
But
do in the
in-
next
in the
8 weeks, we need to see,
Yeah.
because we have been
Yeah.
asking for information for years. We've
Yeah.
been getting nothing.
I think the
Getting
task,
right,
Huh?
nor not
Ta-
enough,
Or not
so
enough,
why do
not
you-
right, it's just, and it's not your board's fault, but,
it's not your fault. It's not-
Well, I think,
No,
I mean,
but-
I think they're going to be responsive to the town, and as much as they can, and as much as I can to this board as well, but I think there's only a certain amount that you can look ahead without really predicting it out, and I don't think we wanna make a panic here,
No.
but
No,
if
no.
the short-term things don't work, then you have to go to medium-term things and long-term things, and we have some of those projected out, and some of them can be rather expensive, so.
and you guys are doing that, and then on the same token, you have to turn to us and say, I need your help in this aspect. And how can we as a board, how can you guys use the resources that are here, that have been here for a number of years, or have been in other similar situations? How can we help you to achieve what you need to achieve?
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's just, you know, it's,
I used the term 8 weeks. I think if the board themselves can get themselves comfortable for the next fiscal year and the next 8 weeks and feel comfortable with what they've got, and then going down the road, you know, just keep everybody informed on the plans for the following year and, you know,
like,
so forth
like,
and so on.
you don't know how much, how much are in reserves? You don't know off the top of your head? No, okay.
Yeah.
And that's one of my concerns is, okay, we're gonna implement this, well, where is it coming from? All of a sudden, we don't want all of a sudden have no reserve, you have no reserves
I think
left.
it's somewhere around $1.2 million.
You see what I'm saying, all of a sudden to sit
That's
there and do-
fine.
yeah.
They, you know, they have a reserve that, you know, but, you know, I think, you know, they don't want to just go start. They want to have a plan for
The
it.
other thing too is that we've already set in motion all the short-term recommendations, and basically those will all be implemented, say, by the end of this construction season or the end of the 2014 construction season. So, you know, because the fiscal year is in the middle of the construction season, it's hard to really see what those benefits are going to be, and then you'll have to let the system acclimate a little bit. You know, we shut the water tank off, the elevated storage tank off up near the golf course, so we can move water in and out of the storage tanks behind Ballpate Hospital to get more turnover there, to help improve to reduce the age of the water in the water system. So that, you know, that's something that we're able to do very quickly. Other things involve, you know, relocating some of the chemical application points to try to enhance some of the chemistry that goes along with it. But a lot of these things are not, it's not like, you know, doubling the wattage in a light bulb and the room's brighter. I mean, a lot of this stuff, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
No, I know.
it's the
Takes time.
the
Oh, no, I
things
know, I know it
to-
takes time, I just,
And so it's tough to spend money in that gap time, say in that 6 or 8 month gap time, when you're waiting with your fingers crossed for the results to show up, to say, okay, we win. At the same time, we still have to operate the facility, we still have to keep DEP, you know, satisfied that we're moving in the right direction, and I don't want to say it's a moving target, but it's hard to know where the finish line is, and and we're trying to get the finish line to come to us as opposed to running to it.
right. And I think it's just, for us as a board, we need better information that we haven't been able to get. We've been
Yeah.
asking for years, we haven't been able to get. And Wayne, are you volunteering to help?
I talked to Lou before. I said if they need some assistance, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to
So-
come over too, you know, and look, have another set of eyes, look at some stuff, just to kind of give you guys,
Yeah.
you know, a hand on where, you know, from the financial aspect. 'cause
Yeah,
you've
I
got
mean,
the,
I think things are going in the right direction, and I'd like to continue moving in that direction and providing information. And I mean, I was brought in to help
Right.
make this process go better. So it's not that I'm not looking for assistance. I'd like to evaluate it myself to make sure that it's the way I want. If the board's satisfied, my board is satisfied, and I turn that information to this board and you folks are satisfied, then I think, then I've done my job, and I think it doesn't waste everybody else's time. But it's not that I'm not looking for the assistance, it's just, you know, part of the expectation is that.
right, no, and you can always, like I said, if it's another set of eyes, just
Yeah.
taking a look to see
Yeah.
what's going on.
In your capital plan, this is a very good start. I think the only thing you're additional is to see, you know, where these funds are going to come from. If there's retained earnings, there's a
Yeah.
balance in that account.
Yeah.
You're going to add something to it, you know, over every year, and you're going to take away from it.
Yeah.
So where does it leave you projected? And this is just projection.
Yeah.
2020. Well, we think we should have this.
Right.
And, you know, but it's always working. You're always, you know, every year this thing changes. Just that's all on this one page. Just keep it simple. You
Yeah,
know, I'm
yeah.
not going into details of $175,000 for electric mixers. I don't, you know,
Well,
that's fine.
I'll give you a quick example. You know, I don't want to jinx myself, but we had an engineer's estimate for fixing the valve actuators for $35,000. We did it for $1,000 in-house by just working together, and our own operations people identified it. Now, have we gotten the results that was expected. You know, we're still evaluating that, but we can already see a difference. So the question is would that $34,000 difference be better spent in another application, or do we have to go the full 9 yards in the way it was originally envisioned? You know what I mean? It is, and
it's the same thing
It's
you
a
do water
balancing act.
distribution improvements. I mean, something like that should be part of your budget. It shouldn't be all of a sudden, ooh, now we get retained earnings, let's do some improvements. I mean, that should be an ongoing,
But that's
or whether it's paid out of reserves.
yeah, but that's really, it's not a decision for this board.
No,
It's a
just-
decision for his board and himself.
But financially speaking.
But we, financially, it's been shown to us that they're gonna do this
I
and.
mean, I think it
Fine.
also depends on, you know, the occasional improvement here or there is one thing. If it's a, you know, we're gonna replace every water meter in town, that's that's a
different-
capital approach, because it's a
Exactly.
planned out
Right.
thing. And I think in some ways that's part of what that is.
And that may be something, and that's where you, as a department, should also look for assistance from the town administrator and the treasurer to decide, does it make more sense to do something like that as a bonding?
Right, right.
To go out and bond,
Yeah.
and as opposed to you figure out and taking out of reserves. I mean, it's all, this all comes into the financial aspect,
Right,
as,
right.
as opposed to the operation of where you make the numbers
Right.
fit, and that's where, you know, it's a separate elected board, know that, but, you know, it's all part of the town, and, you know, utilize what the best financial recommendations could be from the professionals we already have in
Well,
town
I've been
who do
aggravating
this.
people at town hall for the last 5 months.
Excellent.
I mean, not as much Mike, but
Make sure you bring them some coffees or
yeah, I
candy
mean,
or something,
you know,
don't just show up empty handed.
Mike's been very helpful, but I'm in Mary's office once a week, and I've been over to seek as much resource over there as I can and as I've needed, and everybody's
Then I
been
think you
good.
need to go to Winfrey's Candy and buy people a lot of candy to bring over to town hall.
It'll have to
I'm
balance.
not sure where in my budget I can pass that off. So.
No, you're being a pain.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's my okay.
Educational supplies.
Education supplies. Any other questions?
No.
So, okay, so.
I actually, Lou, you've been in the town long enough to know this, every town hall
20
comes
years.
around. I've been in the town 12, every town hall that I've ever been to, you know, you always kind of catch the real angry people, you know, when it comes to the water, okay? I was at a holiday party, you know, this December, and I have a friend of mine who's thinking about leaving the town because he can't deal with the water anymore.
Right.
And he turns on the faucet, and it stinks.
Do you know what street he lives on?
Pillsbury.
Oh, okay.
Terrible.
One
Terrible.
of our water commissioners lives on Pillsbury Lane.
Oh, really?
Pillsbury off of East Main Street.
Right.
Yeah, one of our commissioners lives. So his concerns, his specific concerns, are very well represented on that board, because somebody who lives probably a stone's throw from his house is on the board. So.
Well, I mean, it's good to know, but you know, there's always the question of what steps are being taken. I'm sure, and it goes to the budget.
Yeah.
You know, what steps are being taken. I know there's some major stuff that has to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
to improve. I mean, everybody's tubs are orange, and I'm replacing shower. You know, what is going on? You know, in terms of taking those steps, and it might be some major.
I can give you some simple.
This is in preparation for the town meeting, because you know you're going to catch it.
This board wants to get other boards in town up to speed, especially the selectmen, you know, in terms of, you know, kind of the presentation of, you know, where things are going. So it's not like we're operating in a vacuum over there, and that's certainly not the intention. You know, again, there's some short-term things, and, you know, just we eliminated the use of one of the elevated storage tank to help improve to reduce the water age in the system, where we're actually operating with a bigger active volume in the concrete tanks, which basically means we turn the water over faster and in bigger pieces, if you will. We're installing electric mixers in the tanks, again, to help reduce the stratification that happens. The way these tanks are really designed, the old style, is the same pipe that brings the water in brings the water out. So if the water stratifies with temperature, you basically, you don't have a good mixing effect. So there's places where the old water can sort of hide.
Down in the lowest sections.
Yeah. So we're changing some of the pH adjustment to help improve the corrosion control in the system. We're moving the pre-chlorination point before the filters further back away from the plant to allow a longer chemical reaction to happen. I mean, a lot of these things may not be things that the general public really can get their head wrapped around, but they're all basically designed to make the filtration system there work better.
Can you provide like a summary report and you can put it in the finance and advisory book?
Yeah,
And then
I mean,
that-
yeah, I
it would just
believe
be
we can
helpful,
summarize that. yeah.
As you're saying, but you know, to sit there and say, for people to be able to see, these are the improvements that have taken place.
I think that would
And
go a long way.
This is
yeah.
the improvement, you know, even if you have to put like little pictures or whatever,
Yeah,
this is the
I'll be
elevator
work-
tank, this is
yeah.
the concrete tank, this has gone away, we have this.
I'll be
just-
working with the board to try to develop sort of that public presentation aspect of it, but, the thing is if you want to effectively communicate to people, you have to know what you're talking about, and we're just now putting the finishing touches on making sure we have the kind of the problem completely identified and a realistic solution that's financially viable and makes sense and that you can sell to the public.
I think that's all they want. I think they want to be informed.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't really speak to how well that was done in the past, but I can tell you, it wasn't as though nothing was being done in the past. Now, whether or not to your satisfaction it was being communicated, that's a matter of opinion. I mean, a matter of your opinion, and your opinion matters, obviously. But it's not as though nothing was being done. I just think that when the water quality suffers, the perfect example, the water comes out of my tap, crystal clear, drink it every day. It's not a problem. I live on Marlborough Road, it's part of a loop, but we're a good distance away, from where the water comes from. Why that is, I mean, I generally know why it is, but there are people the next block over from me that tell me that they think it's lousy. So some of it is a subjective thing, but everybody pays the rate, so everybody should expect that the water's clean, and but we're also dealing with groundwater, which has lots of variability.
I think if you put a summary as to what some of the issues are.
Sure.
And the steps that you've taken so far, and then the next steps you're gonna be taking, would be helpful. I mean, sure, especially that would be very helpful, short of having a CIP type of long-term plan,
Right, right.
which you'll still be working on, but at least you'll give people a sense of
I mean, that's
something's getting done,
that's-
because
that's what
it's gonna get to the point of people are gonna stand up on town meeting floor and go, really?
Right,
We're gonna keep funding you guys to give us crappy water, really?
right.
I think that's exactly.
That's
Yeah.
exact, I mean, that's
exactly-
the
But I
issue.
mean, relative to the person that you're referring to, have them come by the office. I mean, that's another part of what we're trying to do, is to have a much better kind of interface with individual residents that have issues. I mean, it's not, I mean, if you're unhappy about something that, you can see us from West Main Street, so it's not like we can run and hide. And my attitude is I'd rather spend some time with somebody to let them know what we're doing. Now, it's a lot easier to do it on a bigger stage as opposed to one by one, but there are a lot of people who don't believe that their water quality is poor enough to warrant coming in. There are other people who think it is.
And I think in the past, it's been, and we meet state standards. State standards doesn't necessarily mean it's delicious.
You're right.
So-
Or even baseball. I mean, this guy. I mean, he has Poland Spring comes in. That's what he drinks. But
Yeah.
it's his kids even taking a shower. He worries.
Our water is in compliance with the sort of the primary drinking water standards. The things that are of concern, color, taste, and odor, those are all secondary pollutants. Now, they're a nuisance, and if you think it's insufficient, just like if you think the school was insufficient, that we needed a new school. I mean, it's the public has to decide collectively what they want to do, and collectively enough people have complained, and DEP understands that there are people in town that are dissatisfied, and that's kind of what has prompted to where we're at. So we're not ignoring anything. It's not as though we're not actively doing it. You can see what we're projecting forward. And I think financially, we're healthy enough to be able to move forward. Do we have to adjust the rates again? I don't know, and a lot of it depends on whether we go for very, very expensive options. This board's attitude is just to try to do the reasonably priced things and see if we can get some results. And kind of helps shape the frame. It kind of shapes the starting point of what the next level of of recommendations that you need to follow on.
Okay.
If things get better.
So Mike, what do you need from the water department at a minimum, and when?
don't know, I'm gonna have to sit down with Lou and figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, because it has to go in the budget, and we don't really want to have to adjust your budget at a special town meeting if at all possible. And I think you probably are gonna get a lot of questions this year at town meeting, so.
Well, it's good if Lou can prepare something to put in the book, it'll reduce the questions on the floor, hopefully. So we're not at the town meeting 3 hours longer than we need to be, you know?
You don't wanna be there 3 hours long?
No, no.
Meetings?
Anything else from the board?
No.
Okay. All right, super, thank you, Lou.
Yep.
I see the next guys are here, but I don't know, does this board, there's stuff, lunch and stuff downstairs, if everybody wants to make a quick sandwich and just take a.
Yeah, do these guys mind? You guys,
Do you guys mind if
have
we
lunch?
take a break? Do you guys have lunch? There's plenty of stuff. Do you mind if we take like a 15, 20-minute break to grab a bite to eat?
I think you deserve one.
I think we might be cranky if we don't eat.
I get cranky.
All right, we're gonna recess and we shut the TV, but building on.
And you've only been there.